Hi, and welcome to the third ever episode of Zero Fox Given. I am still Alex.
I am not Jordi anymore, I'm Pete.
Well, hi, Pete.
Also, if we get to the 5th episode, we're screwed, because if we go any further than that, I can't count higher, so I'm a little worried for this.
This is episode 4 plus 2?
What? Now you're just speaking in tongues.
It's like that Blackadder sketch of like, if I have 2 beans, and I add 2 more beans, how many beans do I have?
Yes, but you can't say
beans.
a wibble.
You can't say, oh, wibble. We are talking about James Bond in this episode, and we will be talking our way through who is the best Bond, who should be the future Bond, who do we think would make a good Bond girl, is there a place for Bond girls now and going forward in the Bond movies, and generally who would be
And
a good
when are
Bond
we going to
villain?
see a Bond boy?
And are we going to see a Bond boy? Are we ever going to see a Bond boy? Sounds like a terrible version of a pool boy, just a Bond boy.
Well, it's awkward when we mention Bond boys and I see you lubing yourself up.
Right, so of course, there is only one place to start with the man that nobody does it better, Sean Connery.
Fuck off.
Gonna slip as many of these
Cut.
titles. This is a Bond flick. We're gonna stick as many of these Bond puns into it as possible.
Oh god.
Right. So let's talk a little bit before we start on in the movies. Let's talk about a little bit of the backstory to Bond and to his casting of Bond. So obviously, before he was cast as Bond at a time where Ian Fleming was still writing the Bond books, quite early on actually. And
late 60s. No, early 60s.
early
even.
60s, I think
yeah,
it was.
63,
And
I
something
believe.
like that. That's a bit early. It's a colour movie, so maybe... No, I don't know. It was definitely 60s. I don't know whether it was that early, though.
It was either 63 or 68. It's one of the wibbly numbers.
It's one of the wibbly ones in between.
Yes.
And obviously, Bond had been the stalwart Englishman before then, and Sean Connery's casting and his performance in Dr. No impressed Ian Fleming to such an extent that he subsequently rewrote Bond to be half Scottish, half Swiss.
So Bond started out as a sterling gentleman and had to be toothless and alcoholic come the end of the second film.
Yeah, basically. And the decision to cast Sean Connery was an interesting one because obviously up till then he'd been sort of the loud Scottish kind of like almost like the Michael Caine of cinema in that kind of sense. Like he wasn't particularly well known for being gentlemanly, if that makes sense. He was always like the squaddy. Like in the film The Longest Day, which is like the endless but still very good World War II D-Day drama that went on in the 50s. Sean Connery's in that as like a squaddy. And like that was very much his perceived roles, being slightly too thuggish to be someone like Bond. Also the Bond movies themselves were just a huge initial risk.
He's basically what he was back then. You could imagine Tom Hardy being him now. If Tom Hardy were to be a Bond.
Tom Hardy's sort of had more... No, it's even worse now because Tom Hardy's had more chops. It's a bit like casting Michael Cena. It's a bit of an extreme example, but it's something like that. It's more akin to when they cast Dave Bautista in Spectre, and people were like, "Oh, that's a bit weird." He's a wrestler, not an actor. And like it was a thing like when they were trying to get Sean Connery into the role, he didn't really know how to wear these very expensive suits that obviously Bond has to wear. Because Bond, if above anything else, is a very much like a gentleman's escapist fantasy. Like he wears the best clothes, he goes to hotels, he's not awkward, everyone knows him, and like he's somehow a spy, but everone knows his name. Like
he gets laid pretty much every fortnight.
all the time, and like he's the guy everyone wants to be. And like when they were trying to get this done, Sean Connery wasn't used to these suits, and so they forced him to sleep in the suits, so that he'd get used to always wearing them. And they are fantastic. They are great suits. I think they even remark in the Dr. No movie, Felix Leiter asks him who his tailor is, because that was the point. So Sean Connery came along, and Dr. No was a very small budget sort of punt in Hollywood. Broccoli, the producer couldn't really get any decent money together for it, and then it was this storming success, largely down to the production design of people like Ken Adam and Sean Connery's like breathtakingly good performances. He's a very strange Bond. He's a very cold Bond. He sort of fulfills that idea in the book of having like Bond having a cruel mouth and being quite a sadistic gentleman. Like he's overtly gentlemanly, but underneath there's this undercurrent of extreme sadism, I think.
Well, I mean, he kills people for a living, so you can't really.
Yeah.
There's a bit of backup to that story, at least.
He's certainly one of the most ruthless Bonds, and like arguably, I mean, he looks very made up. Like if you look at him, like through a sphere of a modern cinematography perspective, he looks very like he's wearing lots of makeup and his hair's greasy. He looks a bit like a pretty boy. In terms of like he's just very almost plastic. He looks very plastic.
He's well, for the time, he's photoshopped essentially.
Exactly, he's very, very heavily edited.
It's as if Bond got a job working on magazine covers.
Yeah, he's an aestheticised Bond, and which obviously is a large part of what Bond was all about anyway. And he's very, we started off. He's again, it's hard to judge him really because he was the groundbreaking performance. He was the one that all the others are based off. Even that your famous thing of names Bond, James Bond, is his introduction in that poker scene in Dr. No, and he stormed away with the role. The thing with Sean Connery is like he was never a Bond that was particularly warm in any way. You never saw a human side to him. He was almost like super heroic in a way. Like there was no sense that Bond could be really hurt.
Yeah, he was detached from every situation he was in.
Yeah, it was all a romp, and maybe not as much as it was under Roger Moore, but like, there was you never got the idea that like Sean Connery was ever really in danger. Like Sean Connery always had a handle on the situation. Was never really phased, never really bled. I mean, let's be honest though. Like his movies, by and large, were great. Like there isn't really a bad Bond movie in the ones that he did. Obviously, Dr. No's fantastic. Thunderball's fantastic. The later ones are good as well.
Insert names of movies we've both forgotten here.
Forgotten? How dare you? Right up to when he went on hiatus for the one film with the other fella, who we'll talk about in a little bit.
The Australian.
The Australian.
A nice pair of smooth criminals.
He had a nice pair of smooth criminals down under.
Ryan Reynolds as James Bond.
Oh God, can you even
take
imagine?
A brief sidebar just to imagine that for 5 seconds.
Let's not, please.
Right, let's take a mop, clean up the floor, and continue.
But yeah, what do you think of? Because obviously, like, he's far more my Bond than I think he is for you. Because you really are more of a later Bond.
Yeah, so I'm a more modern whore because I just started watching them whenever they came on TV. So the Pierce Brosnan and Daniel Craig era was more for me. But looking back, he was, of all the past Bonds, the previous ones, I separated it into the 4 older ones and the 2 newer ones because they went on that giant hiatus when they're having a big legal battle.
Yeah.
He's my favourite out of the 4 older ones, definitely. I love his voice. I just love his voice. It's beautiful.
Is it probably the closest Bond we've had to the book Bond? Again, because he was there when Ian Fleming was writing, and because he was
that also bases it off the point that you made earlier when before we were recording, where you said he influenced the books.
Yeah.
So he'll tie in with those quite nicely.
And we have the introduction of the crazy gadgets. Not quite to the annoying extent that you had in later movies, but the idea of a radio being hidden in a shoe, or wire in his watch, or like some kind of like laser on his... Actually, that's more Roger Moore, but the things like he had things to help him out. Q was very much never present. It's hard looking back at Sean Connery because he is very much a Bond of his time, and like a lot of the things that we would find very, very worrying in a Bond now is very evident in his Bond. Like his Bond is far more openly misogynistic in a lot of ways than Daniel Craig's is.
But that's to go with the time as well.
Yeah.
These things as well, it's hard to judge from our perspective as well because we're both reasonably young, even though we feel like decrepit old men inside. So we didn't grow up with these Bonds either, so we didn't first-hand experience the times that they were around in, so it's harder to relate to. I mean, I feel like I was born in the 60s, but unfortunately it was the 90s.
Yeah, and there's a very uncomfortable scene, like the one I can think of off the top of my head is Thunderball. I think it's Thunderball, where he's in a kind of rest facility, and the kind way of putting it would be forcefully pressures a woman into sex. I mean, the reality of it is he effectively rapes her. And they sort of play it off as like his kind of smooth seduction, but like it's very, even for its time, it's slightly awkward to watch. And looking back, it's absolutely horrendous.
Just remember, kids, 3 no's and a yes is a yes.
Yeah, literally, it is very much in that vein. It's very awkward to watch. And there's also the other thing of like they sort of miss out slightly in the movie, but again in the book it's Pussy Galore, and which by the way, that name, Pussy Galore, you'd never get away with it now. But like the Pussy, the character of Pussy Galore in the book is very clearly made out to be lesbian. And Bond turns her because Bond is that good, apparently. And like the film tones it down, but there are still hints that it's sort of there. And that's uncomfortable to watch. But let's take nothing away though. Goldfinger is and probably remains, if not the best, then definitely one of the best Bond movies of all time. It just it does everything right. They built on the success of Dr. No. They took all the best bits of it and they thought, how can we just make it bigger and improve it? And they did it spectacularly. They didn't try and overshoot it the way they did sort of with Die Another Day later on. They didn't try and over glitz things. It's a very simple, very lean plot. It's got a great villain with a very good plan that isn't overblown.
Yeah. And the villain makes the Bond movie as well.
Yeah, the villain very much makes the Bond movie.
From watching later Bonds as well, when they kind of fuck up a little bit, if you watch a Bond where he's just running around dicking about for 2 hours, sure, it's entertaining because it's just a cheap action movie, but it's not a Bond film.
No, and
so it needs
very
a
much
good, it
what
needs a
Quantum of Solace
compelling
is Bond.
villain. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, you know, Goldfinger is Ulrich Goldfinger is one of the great Bond villains. Dr. No, as groundbreaking as he was obviously like, you know, being the first Bond villain wasn't particularly memorable other than having robot hands. Didn't really do much.
And dying like a bitch.
Interestingly, it's a lot more fascinating than the book. We should also talk about the way they digress from the books. Obviously, like, you know, we had in Goldfinger the introduction of the world's sexiest ever car, which is the Aston Martin DB5, which was just oh my good god, that car, I could marry that car, have its babies.
And we're taking the mop back out and cleaning up the puddle again.
It's a beautiful car, and I defy anyone to tell me that they don't love that car. It is just gorgeous.
I'm not going to argue with you on that.
It's fantastic, and it's interesting because
if I wasn't wearing skinny jeans, I'd probably have a stiffy right now.
Well, exactly. And what's interesting is obviously like that isn't Bond's car in the books. In the books, he drives a restored Bentley.
But that's Skullduggery Pleasant's car, so let's skim over that.
You and your Skullduggery Pleasants.
Fuck you.
Just a terrible book series. Just bloody awful.
Fuck yourself.
Also, where do you think he got that idea from? Anyway, like, yeah, Bond's car was the Bentley. That's the thing that's sort of missing actually from Sean Connery's one. Is like you don't really get a lot of hints of Bond's original career. That's more. I mean, you do when you get to You Only Live Twice, where they do reference it. But like Bond as the naval commander Bond before he becomes an MI6 agent is not really there. Bond himself is sort of more of a two-dimensional character under Connery. Like Connery's a very interesting Bond to watch because he makes the film good. But he himself as a character is very, very two-dimensional. Like he's suave and aggressive and a bit of a dick, and like he's very cold inside. And someone once said something quite interesting.
As far as it goes, essentially.
Yeah. Someone said the quite interesting thing of like Sean Connery is where Daniel Craig's Bond is headed for. Like it's that Sean Connery's Bond. We've missed out the prologue. Like Bond, that's Bond 10 years into being Bond when he's absolutely lost his soul. Like
you could see where you say Daniel Craig's headed for it. Obviously, we see flickers of emotion for him now.
Yeah.
If in the next Bond to come, Madeleine Swan, as we all know,
Bites
she
the dust,
probably someone's going to off her within 5 minutes of the film opening. That's probably what's going to turn him even more to be the Sean Connery Bond. So yeah, I agree with that point. It definitely seems like he's just a man who's completely given up on feeling anything, and he's a cold, heartless bastard.
And the result is you get. Even by the later aggressiveness of Daniel Craig and Timothy Dalton's Bonds, you get the coldest Bond one-liners, like those horrible, like evil puns after he kills people. Like not the kind of silly ones of the Roger Moore era, but like the two I can think off the top of my head is the one in Goldfinger when he in the prologue bit where he dumps the guy in the bath with is it a radiator or a fan?
Fan.
And electrocutes the guy, and like he just looks down at the girl he's knocked out on the floor as he's getting his jacket and just shocking. Absolutely shocking, and just walks out. No, positively shocking. Listen, shocking, positively shocking, and then walks out. And it's not even done as a joke, and it's just like, oh my god. Actually, the worst one, which is hilarious, but oh my god, does it say a lot about the character? Is I can't remember which one it is. It might be it's not You Only Live Twice. I think it might even be Dr. No. It's one of the earlier ones, or Thunderball, where he's dancing with a girl, and he spots someone in the orchestra. They're dancing out in the open on like a Caribbean island in like a touristy area, and like he spots someone about to shoot him, and he swivels the girl so that she takes the bullet, and dies, and then he just presses his hand over the bullet wound so no one sees it, and then he dumps her in a chair like this dead body, next to two American tourists, and like without even missing a beat, he just looks around and goes like, "Oh, do you mind if my friend sits this one out? She's positively dead." No, she's just dead. Like she's looking around like she's just dead, and walks off, and you're like. I don't believe you. Even by Bond standards, you're an ass.
I mean, you say that, but put yourself in the situation when you've got the composure of Bond, so you're detached from it, so you're not going to feel any emotion like that. You'd make a cheap one-liner as well.
He's a very violent Bond as well. Like, you know, people seem to forget, like, the up until the Daniel Craig, the most violent fight in a Bond movie was probably the one from Russia with Love, where he fights Red Grant on the train. Also, like, I love that just because of the amazing bit of, like, Bond Etonian Englishmanness there, when he's like, I knew you were a cover agent because you ordered red wine with your fish. Only a monster orders red wine with their fish.
There's certain things in this world that are inexcusable.
And like, it's interesting with the Sean Connery Bond, and like that violence is very much there. The homophobia is always there. When they obviously like they had Sean Connery got progressively more and more disenchanted with the role, and eventually quit. And the studio. They brought in the other guy, who we'll talk about in a second, George Lazenby. And obviously when George didn't come back, they panicked. And they went back to Sean Connery for a movie, which is Diamonds Are Forever. in between Sean Connery sort of jumping ship to a rival producer to do a rival Bond film, which is now not canon. It's very odd. Which Rowan Atkinson randomly turns up in because reasons. But like Diamonds Are Forever originally started off its life as an intended Goldfinger sequel, when it was in the writing stages, and then they scrapped that idea. And which is why they bring back Shirley Bassey to do the song for it, like they did with Goldfinger. And like those
so we've done Goldfinger. So we've done a guy who hoards gold. What's more expensive than gold?
Diamonds.
Let's do diamonds.
Yeah, no, literally. And like,
what is it in 2017? Crystal meth is forever.
Yeah. Cracks forever.
Actually, I wouldn't be surprised in 2017.
It wouldn't be a huge shock. And yeah, like by that point, when they brought him back for this one last film, he's very clearly too old for the role. He's clearly let himself go. There's a scene where he takes off his shirt in a hotel room, and he just looks like your dad. Like he's just covered in like graying chest hair, and he's
do you mean that collectively,
pudgy.
as in everyone's dad, or specifically my dad?
Everyone's dad. Like he's a bit overweight. Like he's just a bit. He's a bit past it, and like it's very. The game is up, and like it became very clear, I think, to the producers that was the only one he was coming back for.
Yeah,
and
I think it's hard. He could probably take on a couple goons, but then he'd need a good sit down afterwards.
Yeah, and like that was the start of the 70s, and you can very clearly tell it in that movie because he's doing things like he wears a disgusting like lurid pink tie at one point.
Well, that's the thing as well. Bond is always stylish. Which
and by that point it was like this is the 70s thing. It sort of dropped off.
If you play Bond and you're not stylish, just give up the role straight away.
It wasn't quite the 70s. I think it was like 67 or 68. But like it was too much.
I think it was 68.
And yeah, like no, actually no, it was the 70s. It was the early 70s because they had the little in between period with George Lazenby, which was the end of the 60s. So yeah, they got rid of Sean Connery. For that, he dropped off before he came back for his one, which we've already mentioned, and they went to the other guy.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a break in this one just so I can go outside and vomit.
George Lazenby. It's an interesting. Yeah, so George Lazenby. Where do we start with George? Well, there's the interesting story about how he was cast because it's a guy who he looks the part. He's very almost there. He's almost there. But it's very clearly a guy who's not an actor. He's an Australian model.
He blagged his way into the office.
Yeah, he blagged his way into the role because he shared a hairdresser with one of the producers. Not Broccoli, I think one of the other ones.
I can't remember the name off the top of my head.
Neither.
But that producer then went to... I think that producer then went to actually see him in something else as well.
Well, no, he had never been in anything else. He wasn't an actor. Like, he had no filmography.
I think he'd done something. He'd done... Not a film. He'd done some form of live event or live show.
I know he consolidated the role because like he punched one of the stunt guys in the face and broke his nose.
So after seeing him in the commercial, Broccoli invited him to an audition. And during that audition was when I think he also dressed himself up in what was supposed to be Connery's suit as well. So Sean Connery had put in an order into Savile Row for a suit, and then never collected it when he decided he didn't want to be Bond. So Lazenby picked up this suit, dressed in it, he just nicked it, went to the audition and was just like, oh yeah, I'm going to be Bond, accidentally decks a fucking stuntman, who was also a professional wrestler.
There is also something like he bullshitted an entire filmography, because obviously he hadn't been an actor, and like he were like, oh, so what have you been acting in? And he was like, oh crap, what do I say? Oh yeah, these German films, you wouldn't have seen them. Like they're like, and they were like, oh okay, cool, well great. Comes to the audition, and obviously he did, and he got the part. And
he got a bit lucky there. It was just, oh, so you've done German films, so you can speak German. All right, we need a German-speaking Bond.
The thing I will say for Lazenby is it's very odd in that on Her Majesty's Secret Service, he is argued, and not even argued, it just is one of the best Bond movies, but just with one of the worst Bonds. It's very odd. Like if it had only been made 4 years earlier with Sean Connery, or even like as much as I dislike Roger Moore, 2 years later with Roger Moore, it would have been just one of the possibly the best.
Or if it was an idea that was kept on the slate until Pierce Brosnan and Daniel Craig came.
Yeah, exactly. Or Timothy Dalton. I think Timothy Dalton was suited down to the ground actually, and like Lazenby looks magnificent. It's just the end of the 60s, the beginning of the 70s. He's got like that ruffled tuxedo shirt, and he looks great, and everything looks fantastic. And you have the amazing Diane Rigg, who's obviously Olenna Tyrell from Game of Thrones, the Queen of Thorns herself, is the Bond girl.
But we're building up to the crux of the matter. He's not an actor.
He's not an actor. No, and again, you can see that in the way he's oddly. There's like a dancer-like quality. He's oddly balletic when he hits people because he hasn't had that actor thing of like knowing when not to punch someone for real. So in his fight scenes, it looks very much like he just is. He's actually punching people. He follows through in all of his motions.
Yeah,
and it looks fantastic. It looks great. And presumably there is some kind of weird alternate reality where he sort of just went on, where he didn't quit, and he just sort of went on to become Roger Moore.
Probably did a better job.
And probably did a better job than Roger Moore, and you know that, or at least or a different job than Roger Moore did, and that's entirely viable. We also. George Lazenby also did sort of prove, because everyone now sort of looks back and goes like, oh, it was a disaster, like, you know, it was crap, and like they recast him because he was terrible, which is just merrily rewriting history, because that's not what happened at all. What happened was that the film didn't make as much money as some of the previous Sean Connery ones, but it was still a huge success. It was a global, mega film.
Would you think then that was because it wasn't as big a name?
Well, no, it was
the reason.
Well, it was because it wasn't Sean Connery.
Well, yeah,
I think. But like it was, Sean Connery was that role at the time. There hadn't been any others. But like what George Lazenby did prove is that Bond could survive beyond Connery.
Yeah.
So like if he has a lasting legacy in Bond, it is the idea that Connery was not the end for Bond. There was life in other actors for Bond, and we should all thank George Lazenby for that. We also got with his infamous "This never happened to the other fella" line. We also got the beginnings of one of my favourite ever fan theories, which is is James Bond itself
I was gonna say
a code name, because he seems to reference Sean Connery,
a previous Bond.
Yeah, so like for those who don't know, the fan theory, which is brilliant by the way, is a theory that 007 is obviously a code name, but the persona of James Bond is also a code name, and like it's passed down between each like Oxford-educated sociopath who takes the role.
Basically, whoever is the agent in your division who drinks like a fish, shags women, and then lets them die in about 5 hours after you've done it.
Yeah, it gets to be James Bond and 007, and like that explains things like why he's so blasé about telling people who he is, why the international, why every evil villain seems to know
why he's survived for more than 50 years.
Yeah, also like why James Bond. The name is known in the international spy community and like in the Bond films. Like he's not particularly secret, but yeah, he somehow still maintains a secret flat in Chelsea.
Exactly. Which you just killed him.
Yeah,
right,
he's dead now.
Well, that was his secret location. They just ruined it.
They showed it in Spectre.
Fuck off.
So
right, you've just ruined it.
He's already dead.
They showed the interior. It's different.
No, they showed the street as well.
Oh yeah.
Money Penny walks down it. I know that street. My grandparents.
She's gone.
My grandparents have a flat very near there. Bastards.
Name drop. Anyway, before you start, before we get the violins out.
Before we get the violins. So we should thank George Lazenby for his contribution, and like I said, it is a very good Bond movie, and
I mean, to be fair, if you walked into a thing, you'd bullshit as well. If you knew,
if
you knew you were up for a shot at getting a role in a Bond film, you'd bullshit like your life depended
he does
on
look
it.
the part. He looks the part, and he acts.
It's probably
the part.
something to do with the model aspect.
And the thing about it is, like, he's not an actor, and it's very obvious in that movie, but, like, the ending scene where, Tracy Bond's only ever married spouse, is killed, and there's a very touching scene at the end where he's, like, he doesn't cry, but he has sort of, like, a mini, almost a breakdown over her body, when the police officer drives past the car. And it's very moving, and obviously, like, they kept that as part of the mythos of Bond, that this actually did happen in the character's history. They mentioned it, like...
So it's canon?
Yeah, well, this is also where the Bond as a codename theory sort of falls down. And Timothy Dalton's Bond, Felix Leiter, mentions that he used to be married. So it's clearly the same Bond.
Or a cheeky coincidence.
Or maybe some Bonds are acted by different actors, and there are various Bonds.
Yeah, so you can't tell if the different actor is portraying a different Bond, or if he's portraying the older Bond.
There is a hilarious theory as well that terrible film with Nicolas Cage in it, The Rock, it was essentially Escape from Alcatraz with Sean Connery. Like, there's a theory that is Sean Connery playing Bond from the 1960s, because they mentioned that he was a British MI6 agent who was captured infiltrating America and held as a prisoner, and like maybe his persona in The Rock is who he really is. And that's what happened to that Sean Connery Bond, which would be interesting. I mean, like, I don't want to make Nick Cage part of any Bond mythos, so...
No, I think just purely on the basis that it contains Nick Cage, we can discount it.
Exactly.
So let's move on to everyone's favourite Bond.
Everyone's favourite Bond, Sir Roger Moore.
You cunt.
Do you want to start the ball rolling on Sir Roger Moore, or shall I? Because, I mean, before we start getting into the criticism, I do want to spare a moment to say that Roger Moore, in fairness to him as an actor, if he tries to do what Sean Connery had done, it wouldn't have suited him. Like, he was known for comedic
He played
roles.
to his strengths.
He did
everything he could as an actor.
Before they took it beyond the realms of sanity, his early Bond movies are still quite good. Like, he does a passable job. They do sort of become the Bond parodies or the Bond comedies.
Yeah.
Like, you know, by the end of his run, he can't do anything without like knocking over the roof of a car that has a canoodling pair of lovers in it, or you know, something mad. And obviously that reached it
Comes a bloody police academy film come the end of it.
yeah, it ends up with that zenith of horror, which is Moonraker's double-taking pigeon, where you know the gondola becomes a hoverboat, and the I'd call it the magic of editing, but what it really is just the horror of terrible editing.
I'm going to take a drink while you get angry about this.
Forces the pigeon into a double-take, but and obviously there is the thing about Roger Moore, and that he was always slightly too old for the role, even when he was initially cast. He was in his, I believe he was in his 40s when he was cast. And by the end of his run, he's in his late 50s, early 60s.
Having a 40-year-old Bond is fine if you've had that as a Bond, you know, in his 30s and he's built up to that point. If you've got the storyline behind it, that's fine as a Bond.
But his
when
Bond
you
starts off in his 40s.
Yeah.
He was too old to begin with.
That's not right. I mean, we're talking about Bond's, the kind of cheesy comedic element of it. For me, it just didn't work.
No, I mean, again,
especially as a sharp contrast to Connery's Bond being the coldest Bond that we had, to then go to someone who just cracks witty one-liners whenever he feels like it.
To be fair, again, before they got to the Moonraker period of just, you know, one-upping themselves to the point where it became ludicrous.
Yeah.
Roger Moore did have some great one-liners, like the bit where he knocks a guy off a roof and just goes, "What a helpful chap," is brilliant. He did have some of the best villains. I mean, like, he has the, like, let's not forget, he had the longest run as Bond by a long way. He had the longest run. I think it was like 7 or 8 movies he had as Bond.
Yeah.
And he's got some great villains. Like, I mean, Jaws is still hands down.
Jaws is still my favourite.
Yeah, it's hands down the best henchman we've ever had in a James Bond movie, and probably will remain so for a while. Some of his villains are fantastic. Scaramanga was a bit of a misstep. No disrespect to Sir Christopher Lee, but like that wasn't great. And like he largely got it because he was personally friends with Ian Fleming, which is a bit of a.
Well, yeah. Whenever you start to go down that road, you're in for a dangerous ride. Anyway,
Man with the Golden Gun is, in my opinion, the worst Bond movie. As in, like, it's not the most infuriating, but it's the most boring.
Yeah, I mean, you join a Bond movie, you want this is an MI6 agent battling against high-level terrorism to save his country and possibly the world. You don't really want to be sit there having a snooze fest.
Yeah, Roger Moore has that odd sort of dichotomy between some of the things he does are great and are lasting legacies of the character, like the one-liners being slightly funnier, and some of the villains, and like Drax in Moonraker, which is an otherwise absolutely god-awful film, is wonderful as a villain.
Gadgets galore.
Gadgets galore, but the gadgets got a bit silly again towards the end. Yeah, but then...
Well, that was, that kind of sums up the entire period of Roger Moore as Bond. Just towards the end, it got a bit too silly.
Again, and to be fair to Roger Moore, like, he probably saved the franchise insofar as, his first movie was Live and Let Die. And people forget that, like, at this point, cinema had sort of moved on from Bond. Bond was an old-fashioned hero. People were embracing a new kind of action hero. And Bond, the producers were very worried that Bond was going to lose out in this new world, that he wasn't going to be relevant anymore. And so they're looking for ways to make him relevant. And that's why Live and Let Die is very much, in a lot of ways, a blaxploitation film. It's very much, again, of its era. And Bond looks very out of place. Like, there's a bit where he's walking through Harlem, which, could just be an everyday, ordinary neighborhood. And he just looks... you kind of feel scared for him, like more so than like when he's in the center of a volcano in a villain's lair. Like he sort of, you feel like he could get mugged.
Yeah.
It's very
just
very
made the
odd.
poor sod that mugged Bond.
Yeah, exactly. But like, it's I don't know, it's an odd one. And to be fair to Roger Moore, like he did save that as far as Live and Let Die is actually a very good Bond movie. It's one of my favorite Bond movies. And even though they got progressively sillier as they one up themselves, his initial run was pretty decent. Before they took it too far, before he got too old, before they let the joke run a bit thin.
Yeah.
He was fair enough and good for his time. And we should thank him for his service in that regard. Obviously, they let it go on for far too long. This is the thing, like no one really knew how to replace him, and by the end of his run, not only is he looks like someone's granddad, and it's to the point where, like, when he's making out with the Bond girls, you sort of feel sleazy.
Yeah, this is almost grooming.
Yeah, it is very, like, he's old enough to be their dad, and then some.
Their dad's dad.
Yeah, and you got some of the horror, like Moonraker just is a summary of everything that went wrong with that thing. We're like, even though like Drax
I'm
is
still happy that Jaws had a happy ending. Go fuck yourself.
yeah, but like that's fine. But like I love how like Drax, as great as he is as a villain, Drax's evil plot was to essentially destroy the whole world and replace everyone with the cast of Miami Beach. The dancers from from Spandau Ballet.
Look, they told you to follow your dreams, all right? And you leave Spandau Ballet the fuck alone.
Like that was the great Bond villainy of the time, and you had the awful pun where the original Q, who's actually the name I can't remember, the one who lasted for pretty much all the Bond movies.
Oh, John Cleese?
No, John Cleese was in one movie.
Fuck yeah.
Two movies.
Sorry, I'm only thinking of that because I played the shit out of the PS2 game and he was in that and he's stuck in my head.
Cleese's predecessor.
Oh.
The one he retired and The World's Not Enough with Pierce Brosnan. I can't remember his name, but like he was the Q for a long time, and he was fantastic as well. And like there's that awful pun where Bond's making out with a guy on a space shuttle, and like it gets broadcast to the MI6 like procedure room and like the operations room, and M's like, "What the hell is he doing?" And Q just chimes in with what is either the most misjudged or the most brilliant pun I've ever heard an old person say, which is, "I think he's attempting re-entry, sir," which is just. Again, like it's before my time. Like Roger Moore was the 70s, 80s, and I was born in the 90s.
I mean, you can allow for a little bit of 70s and 80s.
But the thing is, like, I feel like a lot of people who were alive at the time, by the point of that last film, were aware the game was up. Like, there's a bit where he walks in. It's him and I think Felix Leiter are like investigating a room, and they're both dressed like 40 years too young. Like they're both wearing like suede tracksuits, and they look terrible. And everything about it just screams like the need for a change. And I think Roger Moore wisely after that realised the game was up and packed it in. And they then moved on to.
And I think the producers also realised, shit, we've gone a bit too far with the cheesy one-liners, because then they brought in, up until Daniel Craig at least, one of the most serious Bonds that we'd seen, in Timothy Dalton, which I think he's quite underrated.
Yeah, Timothy Dalton was the recast, and Timothy Dalton. Yeah, let's get started on one of the most underrated Bonds in my opinion, which is Timothy Dalton. So Timothy Dalton came in and obviously had the unenviable task of taking over from everyone's idea of Bond, which had been Roger Moore for 10 plus years essentially. And it's weird. We had that opening scene in The Living Daylights, his first one, I think.
Yeah, Living Daylights.
Yeah, and like we sort of get treated like a montage of who's Bond. They have the training exercise on Gibraltar, and there's like 5 potential Bonds. And then one of them gets their rope cut and they fall to their death. And they cut to a shot of Tim Dalton just whipping around the camera. And he looks fantastic. Like, he just looks the part.
You kind of feel like that was their nod to the casting process.
Pretty much. And, like, he's a very hard-ass, hard-nosed northern Bond. Like, his northern accent is a big part of that Bond's character. He's also just got like an incredibly authoritative voice. Like up until then, everyone sort of knew him as the voice of that thing, which was like brains, faggots. And every time he says like brains, faggots, it's just.
I can't think of Timothy Dalton's voice and not think of him as Mr. Skinner
from Hot Fuzz. Yeah, exactly. Fuzz. Yeah, that's his thing now. But like he just has that manly voice, and he just was a great Bond. And everyone gives him stick because like he was a much darker Bond than Roger Moore. Like, which if you were a young fan at the time, was a breath of fresh air. But if you were an older fan, was you wanted something more conservative, and it pissed you off no end. But like, I think Timothy Dalton was in a lot of ways the proto Daniel Craig. Like, he was very aggressive and brash, and he had for the first time in a long time, there was the sense that Bond could bleed. Like, every bone was breakable. Bond was in real danger and might not make it to the end of the movie.
Yeah.
He also, which is something even Daniel Craig's Bond struggles with, formed a real romantic relationship and a real characterization with the Bond girl of Living Daylights, which is the only time we've ever seen Bond, apart from maybe Vesper Casino Royale, genuinely seem to care about the Bond girl he's with.
Aside from, I'd still say Inspector, as much as the relationship with Madeleine Swan wasn't as good as what I would say was in as the one in Casino Royale, I'd still say he did form. You could see that he was forming emotional reaction, especially the scene. I
disagree with this. I think he was very rushed.
I liked the scene, the running through the old MI6 building looking for her after she'd been kidnapped.
MI6.
MI6. Yeah, we've been talking about Sean Connery. I'm sorry.
You should go to a speedball, actually.
You're going to have sex with me.
Shut your mouth.
But I still think that scene, it shows good emotional attachment from Daniel Craig there.
We can talk about this when we get onto Daniel Craig's run.
I feel like we're going to disagree.
I disagree massively with you on that.
Fans, like the 7 people that watch us, please side with me. I need this.
He needs the self-validation, please.
Please, don't hate me.
And yeah, Dalton's Bond was they pared back on the gadgets. They really brought it back to the basics.
Yeah, they stripped it down and went bareboat.
And I really like it. I think his second film was the misstep that Quantum of Solace was.
License to Kill.
Yeah, and that it was his rip-roaring revenge tale, and it was very much like Bond not doing Bond things, and like that's a bit of a mistake.
Like an intermittent film.
It really was, and like I feel like if Dalton had had a third movie, he would have properly cemented his position as Bond, and it would have been fantastic.
Yeah, well, it was very close to having that anyway, because after the big legal battle, we'll talk about Pierce Brosnan quite soon, but it was quite close to him being, well, not quite close, they considered him being Bond before Pierce Brosnan.
If he'd had GoldenEye, if GoldenEye had been a Dalton film, I think, and weirdly, I think he would...
I still liked GoldenEye anyway as a film.
I mean, GoldenEye's great, but we'll get on to that probably when we talk about the Brosnan era. But like, the thing with GoldenEye is like it was very much a film that, if you actually look at it closely, seems far more written for a Dalton Bond than for a Brosnan Bond.
Well, yeah, I think that bleeds into the fact that they were hoping, after they had their big legal battle, they were hoping to grab Timothy Dalton back for that role. Well,
that's the thing. Like, they had this legal battle, which was I think if I'm right in saying that they had a conflict over the television screenings of the Bond movies, and this dragged on for 5 years and completely shut down production. And 5 years later, they got it sorted, and they came back to Dalton, and they were like...
And we're in the... that's the start of the millennia now. We're in the 2000s with this.
Mid to late 90s.
Yeah.
And they went back to Dalton and said... They offered it back to him, in fairness, and he said, no, that ship has sailed. And so they went back to the guy who they'd originally tried to cast before they cast Dalton, which was Pierce Brosnan, who was mostly well known for Remington Steele at the time. Brosnan. Brosnan is the far more conservative pick for Bond.
I always view Brosnan as he's like Roger Moore didn't go too far. To me, he's got quite a few aspects of the Roger Moore.
He's a very designed by committee Bond.
He's got a sense of humour.
He's got like pieces that you want from every Bond. So he's got some of the swagger and the sex appeal of Connery. He has some of the humour of Roger Moore. He's got the looks of Timothy Dalton, but made more pretty boyish.
Quite close, yeah.
He's a very watered down, in the nicest possible sense. Like, he's very much like a Bond light with versions of each Bond.
Yeah, he's a Bond medley.
The most inoffensive Bond we've had, I think, by a considerable distance.
He was a very safe choice.
He was a very safe choice, and he did very, very well. Like I said, GoldenEye was fantastic, but the Brosnan era, I think, marked what is possibly even more heinous than the Roger Moore kind of degradation of one-upmanship, which was the bit where Bond became the cliche.
I mean, driving... I believe it was a Jaguar, driving an invisible Jag, shooting missiles at a car up against, a giant ice palace.
Die Another Day was, we'll get onto that in a second. Yeah. Like, GoldenEye was fantastic, but then
I loved GoldenEye.
But, they did all things like they brought back his Aston Martin, they brought back some of the quotes and the quips, and like they made it funny again, but not too funny. Like I said, it was a very conservative Bond, and if they'd stuck to that kind of tone, it would have been fine. It would have got boring after 3 or 4 films, but it would have been fine. But they
exaggerated it as well.
But yeah, like I said, and it becomes noticeable that how much of a cliche every Bond film gets. Like, so the big task, the big sort of flag for this is Tomorrow Never Dies.
Yeah.
Which is the next one after GoldenEye. And what makes it interesting is, like, originally it wasn't called Tomorrow Never Dies. It was called Tomorrow Never Lies, which makes sense because in the film, the main villain runs a newspaper called Tomorrow, and so like that title made sense.
That would have been great.
But the point was, by then, Bond films, and particularly Bond titles, had sort of become so cliche and pastiche that it didn't really matter what the Bond title...
You're essentially parodying yourself.
Yeah, it got misread in a press release, and that's why it became Tomorrow Never Dies. But, like, it could have been anything. It could have been, like, Tomorrow Never Dies Forever, or, like, Everyone Forever Dies Never, Never, Weather. And it would have been, like... Bond film titles just sort of became this meaningless... Like,
that would have been the rap song if they'd chosen that for the intro.
Yeah, Bond jargon that sort of went nowhere. I mean, in fairness, Tomorrow Never Dies had a great Bond theme, probably better than GoldenEye's in a lot of ways. Which again, they sort of dragged Shirley Bassey back for, if I'm not mistaken.
It's kind of annoying for her though. Seems like they just kind of throw her away and then bring her back whenever they feel like
Well,
it.
they bring her back whenever they need to sort of smack people over the head with, look, it's
Hey,
Bond!
You,
It's Bond!
remember, you were in the Bond.
Hey, everyone remember
Come
Goldfinger?
here.
You remember Goldfinger? Yeah, we're doing that again.
That's pretty much the whole film. Just, hey, remember Goldfinger? That was good.
Well, that was good. It's a shame we're not watching that, really, isn't it?
You know, if you flick onto ITV4, they're playing Goldfinger.
Because we've resolved the legal battle. They're probably showing it there. And then the Brosnan era obviously then went to what was in a way a bit of a bold gamble, which was the world is not enough. And the world is not enough is interesting for several reasons. It has the worst male Bond villain for a while, which is Robert Carlyle's crappy terrorist Renard, who feels no pain. And that's no disrespect to Robert Carlyle, who's otherwise a very fine actor.
So
Like,
the
he's
villain
not-
in Deadpool did that, and he wasn't very good.
Yeah, like, it was very much the same thing. Like, they even both have the kind of shaved head look. It's very...
Oh yeah, coming from the man who's just shaved off all of his hair.
You shut your face. I'm not a Bond villain, though, so it's fine.
If we could get a shot of you with a shaved head popping up in the video, this would be brilliant.
Well, if you're very nice. If you play nice. Yeah, but, like, what they did have was the first female Bond villain, really, which was Electra King, which was very interesting. It was done poorly, but the concept was interesting.
But it
And
opened up a different dynamic for future films.
it did really, and also one that hasn't actually yet been properly explored, I don't think. But like,
No.
it's nice that they have that there to build off of. And also, we had Pierce Brosnan's coldest Bond moment, and
Yeah.
very much a harking back to the Sean Connery, like, nastiness and that brutality, where, you know, he's trying to convince Electra King to call off the terrorist plot.
And she looks at him and smirks and just says, "No, you won't call off the guards."
You'd never shoot me. You'd miss me. And then
Shoots her straight in the heart.
Shoots her in the heart, and then just says, "I never miss." And you're like, "My God, that's cold."
You get the feeling everyone who'd watched that on release and just thought, "Fuck me."
Also, there's no build up to that moment, if that makes sense. Like,
No,
she's like,
there's no dramatic.
there's no dramatic music. There's no like, kind of like Bond-esque kind of like hanging by a thread off a cliff.
And I mean,
kind of,
based on past Bonds as well, you're half expecting him to just shag her instead of shoot her in the heart.
Yeah.
You're a little bit surprised when he pulls the trigger and just think, "Oh fuck."
it's one of Bond's most ruthless moments. It's right
Yeah.
up there with Daniel Craig. I know it's in the book, but Daniel Craig's moment, Casino Royale, when M's like, "Are you all right?" And he goes, "Why wouldn't I be all right? Job's done. Bitch is dead." And you're just like, "Oh, that's the way we're going with this." Okay, that's wow. It's so cold it shocks M, who merrily orders him to get shot in Skyfall. But like, also the Pierce Brosnan did introduce the female M. Judi Dench's first film was I believe The World Is Not Enough.
And she
No,
was...
GoldenEye. It was GoldenEye, I think.
Yeah, I remember her being in GoldenEye.
We also have the great... when Bond got in on that great trope of killing Sean Bean. Sean Bean...
Bond did it before it was cool.
Sean Bean doing Alec Trevelyan, who I think is still one of the most interesting Bond villains in GoldenEye. And actually, I've got a proposal for, like, when we get onto who we think should be Bond villains, I think I've got a proposal for if they redid that, if they recast Alec Trevelyan, who I think should play that role. And like, yeah, it was in a way it was sort of like a, you know how we're talking about how like the GoldenEye was almost Timothy Dalton film that Pierce Brosnan just happened to be the Bond in.
Yeah.
It was very much like that for like there's a Roger Moore film towards the end, which is very clearly weirdly it's almost like a Pierce Brosnan film that Roger Moore happens to be in, which is you won't no. Not You Only Live Twice. A View to a Kill?
A View to a Kill, that was his last film.
Yeah, A
before
View to a
Timothy
Kill,
Dalton.
where he's fighting the terrifying Mayday and Christopher Walken's young Bond villain. And they were like the young cool kids on the block, and Roger Moore was a sort of aging, decrepit person. And actually, if you watch that film, and you forget...
Just comes hobbling along with his cane.
Yeah, don't watch that film and just forget it being... Don't think of it as a Bond movie, just think of it as an old guy who thinks he's a super spy, and it becomes a positive... The film becomes charming. But yeah,
It's a sweet
it
serenade.
was very much in that vein. And then they did what they always do when they panic, or when they become too comfortable with the Bond movie, which they did the monumental cock-up that was Die Another Day. Where, I don't even know where to begin with this.
Ooh.
It all got... They looked at the Roger Moore's one-upmanship and thought, how can we top this even more? And we had the invisible car, we had the North Korean mad Icarus sun laser plot, we had... Miranda Frost's very unsubtly named villainess, who was as
We had Halle Berry showing up for shits and giggles.
Halle Berry as sort of Jinx, was she called?
Yeah, I think.
Something completely nonsensical. Just none of it made any sense. Bond is a rogue agent for about 5 minutes and suddenly is not again.
Well, they always tease that idea as well. The Bond is a rogue agent. Oh, but he's doing good, so I guess we'll forgive him.
But they tried to do the rogue agent thing that Timothy Dalton did, and they just didn't do it nearly as well. And like at least with Timothy Dalton, like you can call that film a misstep, but at least it's far more interestingly a realistic take on Bond as a rogue agent than Bond who had been captured by North Koreans and randomly let go in a prisoner swap. You know.
Why not? It's
Also,
fun.
I thought the whole idea of the 007 agency was like they're expendable. Why the fuck would they?
Yeah, why would you exchange
Why would they
them for
exchange
something?
prisoners? Like, yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
But Bond's special, of course.
Yeah, like, and there's they try to sort of deconstruct Bond's. Sorry, that was my phone. They tried to deconstruct Bond as a shut your face.
Why didn't you leave it playing?
They tried to, I think that's my new landlord.
Please God, can we get that ringtone edited to be much higher in volume for the
Yeah.
final podcast?
We have the. Sorry, I think that was my landlord. We have the. I should probably go that. But like, oh well. We have the. No, we have the. I've totally lost my train of thought now. Thanks to Staying Alive.
Stand in line, stand in line. Oh.
Stand on the line. What?
You know, I see that on Misheard song lyrics.
No.
It's brilliant. It just goes up there with John Bon Jovi's sitting on a chair. It's fantastic.
Oh dear. And yeah, so the Die Another Day is tragic missteps, just continued one after the other with yeah, like why would they exchange a prisoner? Like also yeah, like I said, it was a deconstruction of the. They tried to do a deconstruction of Bond as a character by having the villain be a sort of Bond
This is
and that-
severely unprofessional.
analogy. You shut your face. I'm professional. I'm the most professional. Yeah, they had like the deconstruction where like the North Korean guy who'd had plastic surgery to look white was like based himself on Bond. Gustav Graves, I think it's called.
Maybe.
And it's very also like that is the most like when you're naming a Bond villain, that is like the most like
Graves.
Gustav Graves. Just I mean, could you have a more like?
Hey, fuck you. Alliteration is sexy.
It's a pastiche. It's you know it's the kind of thing Austin Powers took the piss out of. You know, it's stupid. It's not.
Fat Bastard, the next Bond villain.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly. Like
I'd
they
watch
might as well
that.
have. Gustav Graves is right up there. Like it's a bit like the joke they make in Jessica Jones with the villain's called Kilgrave, and they're like, "What was Corpsey McCorpseface taken?" Like,
Quick, how's Bond going to escape? He's going to ride on Boaty McBoatface.
literally, it's like you know, and that was the bit where the gadgets reached peak stupidity as well, with the invisible car and the laser watch and like all this kind of crap. And like, it's a bit like it became that Eddie Izzard sketch of like. You know, all the Bond, or the Bond's gadget envy, like, you know, it's somehow has the world's most ridiculously specific gadgets, and somehow uses them all during the adventure. Like, he never not uses a gadget. There's never a gadget he comes back in with.
They've all been designed for a specific moment.
Yeah, like, it's like Q is psychic. You know, it's not, if you've seen that Eddie Izzard sketch where, like, you know, he comes back and he's like, Q, I got a lot of fucking things I didn't fucking use. Like, you know, the watch that turned into a Sabutio table. What was the point of that? Then there was the jam trousers. That was
I'd love
extraordinarily
that.
funny.
That sounds like a Yahtzee Croshaw sketch.
Literally,
Jam
like-
trousers.
You know, the shark repellent, which is like a Batman-esque kind of like, you know, Adam West style fuck up, like, you know, Bond shark repellent. Like, you know, like you got dumped in a pool full of sharks and you just had like this thing you could just breathe and you just fuck off. You know, just for what?
I mean, maybe fucking Q had seen Jaws or something.
you know,
and shat himself.
I'd like to see, again, like Eddie Izzard did this sketch, I'd love to have seen that moment where Bond had the wrong gadget for the wrong thing, like, you know, like...
presses the button on his watch and a dildo comes popping
You
out.
know, literally, like, you know, like he's stuck in like a cell. I was like, oh crap, I've been captured. All I got's my jam trousers. Shit.
Oh, this isn't going to work.
Yeah, I'm dumped in a shark pool. All I got was my jam trousers. Oh well, here goes nothing, I guess. And the sharks are like, that's odd. He's wearing jam trousers. Let's just leave him alone. Shall
I'm
we?
a prisoner of war, but I've got 500 tabs of E.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, Die Another Day was such a flop and so stupid that it effectively killed off Pierce Brosnan as Bond.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't a case of he got too old. It wasn't a case of like people didn't like his Bond. It was just that the Bond films got so stupid.
It
That they
needed someone to come along.
They sacked him. They were like, okay, we need an entire reboot.
We need someone who's a serious bastard.
Yeah, we need to completely take this away from the stupidity of Brosnan. So, yeah, before we get into our final Bond, Daniel Craig, I think
Best.
nobody doesn't matter. We will take a short break to allow you to go tinkle and look sad. And we will be back in a
I thought
short
you were going
while.
to say Tinker. I'm not going to make myself a Robocock. Take two. Daniel Craig as a Bond. As a Bond.
As a Bond girl.
Yeah, as a Bond girl, sorry.
Daniel Craig is a Bond girl. I mean, like...
I would.
They did that scene in Casino Royale where he comes out of the ocean in his briefs, which was like a callback to, what's her face? Honey Rider from Dr. No. Oh my god, the sexiest Bond girl.
So we're back to the stupid fucking Bond girl names again.
Like, you can back right up. Honey Rider, I don't care what she was actually like as a character, like that bit of her coming out of the ocean was...
Just makes me think of a fucking Randy Honey Badger.
I mean, I say that, Daniel Craig coming out of the ocean, like, wow.
Yeah. We've got a wide canvas.
I paint with a wide brush.
And after a night with Daniel Craig, you'd have a wide something else as well.
With a wide brush. That sounds hideous.
It means you can't be fucked to paint a canvas with a tiny little pencil.
Oh. Right.
This didn't go well.
This did not go well as a conversation for me. Right,
Daniel Craig. Out.
So yeah, there was controversy when he was first cast, obviously, because like he was blonde, and apparently this was unacceptable. Like they were like, he got death threats on. I mean, where else? Social media. The reasonable response, like that.
No, The Guardian.
Yeah, that bastion of reasonable response and cool hair that is YouTube. Because he got it off Layer Cake, if I remember correctly. That was the big thing before Bond, and like they cast him basically off that, and he was brilliant. And Casino Royale was brilliant. Arguably, in my opinion, the best Bond movie there's been ever. Full stop.
Because he shits on other Bond movies.
Yeah, but like it's great and like it's simple and it's that thing of just having a very lean plot. Like you get rid of all the trappings of world domination stuff, and like they take the essence of the book, which is just that Le Chiffre cannot afford to lose this poker game, and run from there. And it's very stripped back and it's very good. And they get rid of all the gadgets and they concentrate on they go back to that Timothy Dalton thing again, like humanizing Bond. Like the bones are breakable, he suffers, he hurts, and it's very much actually a Bond of our time now. Like I think that's what the world now demands from Bond. Like that kind of much more cynical, world weary take on Bond is
Yeah.
We also get for the first time since Sean Connery's like the sense of the psychopathy of Bond. That like to be Bond, you have to be a deeply fucked up person, and like you really like by the time of Spectre, like he drinks, he takes pills, he's deadened himself to all emotion, he kills people on a whim. Like even in Casino Royale, there's that thing about like he's very much a Bond who there's a line where they find the woman he had sex with strung up dead in a hammock. And M's like, I tell you to keep your distance emotionally, but that's never really been your problem, has it, Bond? And he's like, no.
No, he's emotionally detached from all scenarios. Except...
Yeah, but then of course, like, when they have the ending of that, and he's like, the bitch is dead, like, you get a sense, like, there is a Bond that feels underneath it, but, like, it's a deeply... And obviously Skyfall kind of reinforced that with his parents' death, like, the kind of revisiting of that he's a very traumatised person.
Yeah.
And, like... We'll get onto this again when we're talking about the recasting of Bond, but, like, this is why I think that certain castings are just not possible, just because you'd lose the things that I think are necessary to talk about when you're talking about Bond, which is like that he's a deeply flawed character.
Yeah, he's not Mr. Perfect. He's not Mr. Save the Day.
Yeah, he's not meant to be the action hero.
For all intents and purposes, he's an anti-hero.
Yeah, it's a bit like, Jason Bourne, if you want to compare another super spy of the recent era, like, Jason Bourne was like psychologically damaged and sorry his amnesia, but like he was a nice dude. Like, he was a very kind of vanilla American hero. Whereas Bond is a lot more interesting as a character in a lot of ways because... he might not be able to do cool cinematography with pencils being shoved through people's hands like James Bond can, but like he is a deeply, deeply screwed up and deeply troubling individual, and like he's sort of what you expect in the modern world, like in this world of terrorists and spy states and like where there's no clear enemies.
He's been opened up, he's been exposed to all the things in this world. You can't expect to have someone come out completely perfect afterwards. He's someone who has been warped and twisted by the things that he's seen.
To do that career in the first place, you'd have to be fairly warped, to be able to kill people on a whim. Like, it's not even like being a soldier where you're killing people who are very clearly defined as the enemy. Like, to go and kill someone who you don't necessarily know anything about just because you're told to by your government, like a private individual in another country.
So the scene in Spectre when he's being, when he first meets Madeline Swan, she's giving him a health assessment, just, so you didn't take occupation. Yeah, that's not the kind of thing that looks good on a form.
Yeah, killing people.
I kill people.
Well, yeah, that thing where she's like, doesn't bother... No, that's an investment. Like, it doesn't bother you at all killing those people. And it's like, I wouldn't be very good at my job if it did.
It's just an agent, he kills someone, goes and has a cry wank afterwards.
Yeah, because like, there's the thing, like, when she kills someone, he, like, comforts her in the shower, like, afterwards.
Yeah.
Like, in a slightly less intrusive way than Sean Connery comforted that nurse in the shower in Thunderball.
Yeah, I've never known someone to go up on trial for comforting.
Well, I mean, any day now.
Go to prison, drop the Oh.
Like you've missed out,
Oh,
you've missed
God.
out a step there, I think.
Oh.
Vice President, drop the cup, pick up the soap. It's all a thing.
Well, I mean, you know, in real life situations, you want to pick up the soap afterwards.
Orange
so.
is the new creamy.
Well, you don't like a good creamy orange?
Um,
And now we're about 5 million miles away from the topic.
Yeah, anyway, Daniel Craig came in, obviously there was all this controversy, and he blew it away. Yeah, so they, you know, like with like, you know, it was the thing they always do when they have a successful Bond movie, the next thing they always do is they make a misstep. You know, you had it with Timothy Dalton, and you had it with Pierce Brosnan, and you had it with Roger Moore, definitely, and arguably Sean Connery as well. And they do it again with Quantum of Solace, which
Bond
is...
on a hiatus.
Yeah, which is just, it's a very odd film. I have a slightly unique defence of the film, which I'll come into in a moment. Like, I'm not going to contest the fact it's not a good movie. It's just not a good movie, regardless of how you want to think about it. But there is an explanation for why it's permissibly bad, which I'll get onto. But like, what did you think of Quantum? Because I remember like, Quantum was one of the first Bond movies I went to see in the cinema.
I didn't mind it. I didn't mind it mainly because, you know, all the Daniel Craig Bond movies, of course there's only 4, but either way, all the Bond movies with Daniel Craig, I still quite enjoy as action films because at the end of the day I'm quite a whore for cheap action films, so it's a couple hours of someone shooting
But the
guns
action
and
in
running
Quantum of
around.
Solace is so disconnected, I think, from the narrative. Like, it's just Bond goes to a place, has a fight, goes to another place, has a fight.
It's like the Borderlands of a film, essentially. Just go to this area, kill everything and move on. I enjoyed the spectacle of it.
Like when other
I just don't view it as a Bond film.
Yeah, but like when other characters in the movie call out Bond for behaving like a twat, like every not once or twice, but every 5 minutes. There's one funny gag actually, which is when he's chasing. I can't even remember her name. She's so forgettable. The Bolivian Bond girl.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, I think someone wants to kill you, and like she gets out of the car, and the black guy on the motorcycle turns up and goes, you were supposed to shoot her, and he just goes, well, I missed, and smacks him off the bike.
I did like that.
It also wins the World Award for the greatest terrible extra in a movie, which is the bit where Bond's sitting on his motorcycle outside Dominic Green's like compound. You know, he's giving that guy the Universal Exports card so we can track the phone. Behind Bond, over his shoulder, you see this Haitian extra. It's Haiti, isn't it? Yeah, Haitian extra sweeping with a broom 2 foot off the ground. Like the broom is just like it's tragically bad. And once you've seen it, you can't unsee it.
You've tried, buddy.
It's like, but I just don't know what the extra's thinking. Like, you've been told to like sweep in a film, and you thought, what? Just don't. I presume it must have
Don't
been
actually sweep.
I presume it must have been like a sound thing. Like,
Yeah,
they were
it's
like,
like,
please
no,
don't
if
make
you
any
sweep,
noise.
we can pick it up on the boom, so don't.
And they were like, well, we also been told like, yeah, we can hear it on the boom, don't sweep, just mime sweeping, and don't worry, it's out of camera shot, and it just isn't. And
Imagine he goes home and shows it to his parents. This is what you paid thousands for acting
This
school.
is my great acting debut. I'm going to be a star.
I'm a method actor. I really had to become that person.
I was the broom. The broom and I were one. It was an extension of my hand. Unfortunately, I have a severe dyspraxia problem, and that's why the broom didn't touch the floor. It's just.
Actually, might go home and watch Quantum of Solace again now, just to pick up that moment.
That moment. The bit where he breaks into a hotel, murders a dude, pretends to be the dude. It's really unclear. No one knows what the hell's going on.
Yeah, I'm him now.
Bond walks out. Girl turns up in a van. She's like, get in, and he's like, or like a mini. He's like, get in, and even Bond.
Like, fuck it.
Even
yeah.
Bond's expression is like, I don't know what the fuck's going on in this film, but I'll just go along with it. The thing is, like I said, there is an explanation for it, which is. Not many people remember this, but at the time Quantum of Solace was being made, before it, went into proper production, there was a writer's strike in Hollywood. No, this is generally thing. There was a writers' guild strike, and people weren't writing for movies in that year, and so that's why if you actually look at that film, like a lot of films have very terrible scripts, and so the Bond script for Quantum of Solace was basically just like 10 pages long when this happened, and they were like, well, shit, we got to film in like a year's time. Like a half a year's time, filming starts in 6 months. We're already very deep in pre-production. What the hell do we do? And so it became a kind of collaborative writing effort between a bunch of guys who'd never really written anything before, and Daniel Craig writing a lot of his own dialogue. And like, bless Daniel Craig, he's a wonderful actor. He's not a terribly gifted writer, and that's why Bond ends up being a sort of Jason Bourne-Exby. And like it's very noticeably bad, but like you can see why. Like, they're not writers, and the people who had to write it were not writers.
I mean, given the circumstances, then it's hard to slate it as a movie because it's
it's a rescue attempt. It's a rescue attempt of a Bond.
It's a bad movie, not through bad thought or anything like that. It's just the best of the situation that had shut on them.
If you look through it, there are some great ideas. Like the idea of Bond sort of skydiving in a plane was cool. Like, you know, like in the plane, just like plummeting like Icarus. That was cool. The idea of the girl being...
We're not sinking.
Yeah.
We're falling.
Yeah, literally. And like the girl being the terribly named Strawberry Fields. And abysmally named, not just because it's a bad pun, but just because it's not even like a Bond girl name. It's just ridiculous. She might as well have been called like Farmer's Market. Like, just it's so not. It's so not. It's so not.
Right. The thing about innuendos is they're supposed to keep us guessing. They're not supposed to paint a picture in our minds that leaves us sleepless every night. Yeah, I'm just going to take a gander down to the old Farmer's Market.
Her name just puts you to sleep. It's that boring. Gemma Arterton, who actually has to, you know, gets asked to do that role, and I feel very sorry for her. Like, she just sleeps with Bond because reasons as well. Like, it's oddly functional. Like, there's no real reason for her to go to bed with him other than it's a Bond movie. It's like she glances down at the script and goes, "Oh, I guess I'm sleeping with that dude now."
Well, my name in the script is Farmer's Market. I guess I have to. I guess I got to get it out at some point. You sick bastard.
If we ever sell t-shirts, my name is Farmer's Market.
If this thing picks up off the ground, I swear to God, I'm going to get t-shirts printed that just say Farmer's Market.
Yeah, and like it was just awful. But there are, like I said, there are good ideas that run through it. Like there is, like her dying by being drowned in oil and left on the bed, and like, it's a kind of callback to Goldfinger.
Yeah.
Which, let's be honest, with Goldfinger is by far and away the stupidest moment. Like she's died of skin suffocation. That's totally a thing, right?
Yes.
No. Okie dokie. Moving on.
You don't realise it's actually nanocells. They're on our skin. We have miniature lungs on every single molecule.
We're amphibians. We breathe through our skin.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah, but like she gets drowned in oil, and it's a great visual. It looks great. M flying all the way out to Bolivia to scold Bond somehow doesn't quite ring true.
Especially when she doesn't really scold him anyway, because she then sticks up for him about 5 seconds later.
He mugs 3 other MI6 agents, like holds her at gunpoint and then fucks off, and she's like, "Yeah, I trust you now." And you're like, "Wait, what?"
Because that's the kind of reckless shit I expect you to do.
Oh, the fuck?
Anyone else think Judi Dench just couldn't give a fucking Quantum of
Solace?
Solace?
The Bond villain scheme is actually oddly sensible for a Bond villain, like to buy up all the water and hold it to ransom.
Well, yeah. It's a very foresighted scheme as well.
Yeah, it's a very realistic Bond villain. Like, it's something a real life Bond villain
because
could
they
do.
used... I think the line that they use is something like, when all the oil's burnt out, water's going to become the most precious resource.
Yeah, and like it's you know, they need to control as much of it as possible. Like obviously it became sort of retrospectively like re-engineered to be a Spectre plot, but like Dominic Green. This is the thing though, the actual villain Dominic Green was so boring.
He was just a bitch.
He was just a whiny little gimp, and like no one liked him. And
I'm actually quite glad they found him dead in a fucking desert with motor oil in his stomach.
Like, if they'd done that as the ending to a Bond villain of stature, that would have been badass. As it was, you were just like, "You're great, he's dead."
Well, he's a bitch and he died like a bitch.
Yeah, but like, you know, the idea of Bond just leaving the guy in the middle of the desert with a can of oil is a pretty grim way of killing someone. Like, that was cool. And also, like, they sort of harped on a bit too much, but I know the film, and like I said, it's not a Bond movie because it's not really about Bond being sent on a mission.
No,
it's about Bond just taking personal revenge, and that's why it's very grunty as a movie. Like, it's, you know, they play up Daniel Craig's kind of beautifully ugly quality of, he looks very startling and he's got amazing eyes, but he looks very thuggish in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
and they really play up that aspect.
I mean, the more you focus on him, the more you notice things. And you're like, wait, shit. You're not this suave, sophisticated British agent. You're
He's
this
got the least complicated
6'2", jacked as fuck guy who somehow manages to fit a suit and kicks the shit out of people.
Yeah, and anyway, yeah. So that was a thing, and it's a film that if they had more time to make it and proper writers, it would have been arguably really good. And if they'd cast the proper person to be the villain, and they hadn't had, there are a bunch of subplots as well that just dragged it down needlessly. Like the Vesper subplot, like we get it, he's on a mission of rampage for Vesper, but like it just came to that was fine. We knew that they didn't need to hark back to it every 5 minutes with conversation.
Yeah. It's more like the plot gave you a specific thing, but it kept nudging you every so often.
Yeah,
just saying, hey, remember this?
Hey, remember Vesper? Hey, remember this?
Hey, this is what you're supposed to be thinking right now.
Yeah, hey, remember this girl's dad was like in the Bolivian government and got betrayed by General Maduro, whatever the hell he's called. Like, that's important. That's important. Don't forget that.
Oh yeah, and the general shows up for a bit.
Yeah, like, and then that was a meaningless subplot. The one good thing about that was when they and one of the great scenes in that movie is the bit where they kill off what's his face. the guy from, what's it called, Casino Royale's, the guy he thought was a turncoat but isn't.
Oh.
I can't remember his name now. Oh, so sorry. He's a book character as well. But like, he dies in the street and he's he's got that thing like
Mathis.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
it's like she gave everything for you. Forgive her. Forgive yourself. Forgive, and then he dies and Bond dumps it. Also, because they don't
is that how you treat your friends? Yeah, he wouldn't care.
That's a wonderful Bond moment because that is a realistically like Daniel Craig Bond moment that he dumps the guy in a trash can and it's like essentially and she's like even she is like I can't believe that's how you treat people you care about and he's like he wouldn't care. He knew the game and like that's like you get a sense of how much that weighs on even as Bond knows it's the right thing to do how much it weighs on Bond to do that and like that was one of the good things that they should that sort of Bond that really emotionally broken Bond rather than like because the problem was we then went into Skyfall and the Bond we got was
old and drunk. That was emphasising the point.
It was very much the Bond of Sean Connery and like it was very much like here is Bond cold and detached and sort of like erase like he's purposely doing everything to erase his own emotions.
Well, it was also him just being out of place in the world. That was the whole point that the film was trying to emphasise. Whereas I've got kind of high hopes for the next Bond film with Daniel Craig because, as we mentioned earlier, they're going to off Madeleine Swan. If they can go and make a whole film where Bond is this emotionally broken individual.
I don't want them to do that broken because the thing is that we didn't get that properly in Quantum of Solace, and the thing is that that means we got the weird jump that made no sense from Casino Royale where he's an arrogant tool and Skyfall, where he's the more jaded, emotionally dead inside guy. And Quantum of Solace was also meant to be like the kind of emotional broken Bond of in between those stages.
It was supposed to be the link.
Yeah, but it was so badly done that the link fell apart because they instead went for like thug Bond rather than like the few moments of very good broken Bond you get in between. And they just threw that to one side. And if they do that again, if they go back down that route, I think it's going to be just a massive pain to watch again. It'll be another Quantum of Solace. Like if obviously he needs to be broken up about his wife's death, but like they need to do it in a way that is very much like a jaded spy's wife has been killed, and he's not, and this is the second time it's happened, and like he's just.
Well, if they go back to being emotionally detached again,
so done with them, like like not like his angry, passionate revenge, but like him.
No, just this is my life. Cold, this happens all the time.
So dead now that he's just going after them and just murdering them one by one.
A line like this comes with the job. Or something like that.
Something that on the nose. It's in the job description. Dead wife, tick.
God, it's not a fucking Hugh Grant Bond movie.
Yeah, and so we'll get on. Like Skyfall's the next one, obviously. Skyfall. It has some huge and hilarious plot holes, but I love it. I love Skyfall just as a nostalgia trip. It is just a great example of like all the things that make Bond fun.
And the villain.
The villain is wonderful.
Yeah.
Which is Raul Silva played by Javier Bardem, who is just show stealing. They also have the first hint of Bond having a gay subtext, which is
what
nice.
Makes you think this is my first time.
I tell a lie. They sort of had that with Sean Connery with Sean Bean and Pierce Brosnan's interactions, where like Sean Bean's like, we used to share everything, and I mean everything, and you're like, wait, what? Like that there was that hint of it, and Skyfall. I mean, the thing that everyone obviously points the finger of hilarity at in Skyfall is like the list. What happens to the list? The list is the entire like MacGuffin that drives the first third of the plot, and then
those spies have still died.
Yeah, and then it gets forgotten, and like it all becomes irrelevant. That was my one criticism. There was also like a theory. There was a rumor that his Scottish manservant dude, whose name I can't remember at this point in time. I'm terrible with names. I'm sorry.
Yeah. All I can remember is just, good God, you're still alive.
Yeah, that guy. Kincaid. He's called Kincaid.
Yeah.
There was a rumour that Kincaid was going to be played by Sean Connery for a while.
Oh, that would have been cool.
It
would have been cool.
It would have been simultaneously really good and really terrible. And in retrospect, I'm glad they didn't. At the time, I would have loved them to have done it, but in retrospect, I'm glad they didn't. I think it would have been a cheap audience.
I still just like the line. I still just love the line. Just try and stop me, you jumped up little shit.
Yeah, which is great. And that whole thing of M dying and Bond's parents being revisited, that was all clever and done well. And I liked the new Q. The Q was great. They reintroduced some of the gadgets again, but not overboard.
It also emphasised the point as well. Q's young. He's in a world that's more technologically advanced than he is.
Yeah.
And he's kind of detached from that world, which makes him detached from his job, all things like that.
That little great aside where...
especially the
Naomi
line...
Harris's Moneypenny, who I think is great, her Moneypenny. But like the bit when she's like, I got sent because Q's afraid of flying, and Bond like doesn't even like pause. She goes, of course he is.
Well, I love it. It's just a gun
and a radio. Not exactly
Christmas, is it?
And also like his beautiful. Actually, I want to spare a word to talk about the change in Taylor. You know, obviously in the early days it was all sort of Savile Row stuff. Now it's Tom Ford as his Taylor, and I'm going to be honest. I prefer. I think Daniel Craig's tailoring has been on point, particularly the dark blue navy tuxedo with the black collar that he wears in Skyfall is absolutely on point.
There was also a suit he was wearing in Spectre. Actually, the suit he wears in Spectre when he meets Christopher Waltz's character the first time.
Oh, the blue one. Is it grey or blue?
It's either very dark blue or it's almost black.
I think it's dark blue. His tan suit in the desert, like, you know, he's probably the best dressed Bond, I'd say.
Yeah, but that goes with the time as well because that's very much in fashion as well now. You know,
Yeah,
people admire a good suit now.
It's a slimmer fit. It's a slimmer cut. It's a lot more refined.
Yeah, it's a tailored fit.
I like the fact that in in Spectre they went back to Bond's original SAS strap watch that he has from OHMSS. Actually, they played out that on Her Majesty's Secret Service theme quite hard, the link between them, because in the trailers they had a version of it for the teaser trailer for Spectre, which they didn't really fulfill, sadly. And again, what you say is that Daniel Craig Spectre and Skyfall re-brought back that kind of Ken Adams incredible set design. I know it's not Ken Adams, but like that Ken Adams-esque incredible set design that was so breathtaking in Doctor No, and so, you know, just, it was beautiful. Those films, whatever you think of those films, are just beautiful, and everything in them is beautiful.
The old MI6 building, or the shot up, blown up MI6 building, is still one of my favourites.
That's a great scene.
It's great.
Christopher Waltz is a great Blofeld. I really wish they hadn't gone down the road of it's his brother, because that ruins it.
It does, and it makes me sad because Christopher Waltz can play a fantastic villain in whatever he's in. If he's playing the villain, you know it's going to be top notch.
It's weird, like we've talked about how the Bond films tend to suffer from one-upmanship. Spectre suffers from that. Like it's all the best bits of Skyfall slightly overdone.
Yeah,
like it's got all the beautiful aesthetic stuff. It's got all the nice locations and the prettiness, but it's too lingered on.
Yeah,
like and there's too location hopping. Like they have the beautiful specially made Aston Martin DB11.
Yeah,
which is not roadworthy. You can't actually buy it, which is a bit sad. But that gets blown up immediately, and like they even have a gag about that. Like Q's stay-at-home persona is played up with the reference to his cats, but then he comes out to Switzerland or whatever it is.
Yeah, he orders a prolific digestive enzyme shake.
And the other one's like, this is the other thing that really irritates me about Spectre, is that the Bond girl, who's apparently supposed to be like Vesper Mark II and is the love of his life, is really boring. And also is the daughter of a previous villain who I didn't really care about.
Yeah, Mr. White.
Which is slightly pointless. She also gets over the fact that he effectively killed her dad. I know dad committed suicide, but the fact that he effectively killed the dad is sort of brushed under the carpet.
But again, you could chalk that up to she knows the game as well.
There's an incredibly uncomfortable scene of him being drilled in the face. That sounded more like, the thing is, that was grim, but it was grim in a way that was gratuitous rather than plot worthy. Like when they tortured him in Casino Royale with the bull. Which I'm amazed, because it's in the book, I'm amazed they had the balls, so to speak, to
smack him in the balls.
To smack him in the balls. And in the book, it's a carpet beater, I think, and in this, it's a rope with a knot on the end. But like that scene, every guy in the cinema was just, oh my god, like you can't even imagine. And
because you know how much that fucking I do.
Bollocks with a rope, yeah, exactly, and just, but it served a narrative purpose. Like it wasn't gratuitous.
It was brutality.
There was a point to him being tortured. Whereas in this one, he gets tortured, and like not only is he fine immediately. But like nothing really happens, and it's just there to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Blofeld's evil plan doesn't make a whole lot of sense in Spectre. At least in Skyfall, the villain's plan, like the plot MacGuffins didn't make sense, but the villain's plan made sense.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Well, he was just exacting revenge.
Yeah. Whereas
this one you don't really know what he's doing. Are you exacting revenge? Are you just trying to fuck things up? You know, you've got the Nine Eyes program.
There is the great line though, which is what cemented Ralph Fiennes as M for me, which is the bit where.
And now we know what C stands for.
Like, we know what M stands for, moron, and like pulls the trigger and nothing happens, and like Randolph Fiennes like, and now we know what C stands for. Thing is,
the fact that you look a little before you shaved your head, the fact that you look a little bit like Andrew Scott makes it even more terrifying when you say that line to me.
Don't look anything like Andrew Scott, you bully.
Well, you know, if our viewers actually pay attention to the picture, they've probably now guessed whose voice is whose on that.
Probably, yeah.
I mean, you can say what you want. I'm pretty sure you still look more like Andrew Scott than I do.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But yeah, I don't know. Skyfall, like I said, it suffered from doing the things that that Spectre suffered from doing the things that Skyfall did, overdone. So like the plot nonsenses in Skyfall, which we forgave because the rest of the film was so good, got elevated and made too obvious to ignore in Spectre.
So you lose the set.
So you lost the sense of being able to forgive it.
Yeah.
That being said, the opening, like
the Day of the Dead.
Yeah, the unbroken Day of the Dead shot is beautiful and amazing.
Like that. And that must have been a
I also have to think about
to record.
the real Day of the Dead is nothing like that. And so like, but now they've started it doing like that because of the film, rather than the way around. Because they're like, oh crap, tourists are going to expect this now.
Yeah.
So they just did the whole thing, which is brilliant. Like the Bond films have forced the entirety of a country into behaving differently.
You bastards.
The whole Spectre organisation. Dave Bautista, I will say, puts in a good performance as the henchman Hinks, and it's probably the best henchman we've had in the Daniel Craig era.
Oh yeah.
And I call back to the kind of like Jaws things.
He needs to trim his nails, but
Doesn't need to trim his nails a little bit. It's almost like Jaws Mark II. It's just with his nails.
Although that was one of the moments where I kind of sat there and I thought, Bond, you're fucking sloppy. When Bond ups himself to the height of pettiness because they stole his girl, he threw a plane at them.
Yeah.
That's warranted. But when the guy flies through the windscreen, you see him lying there, assumed dead. That seems to me like something a 00 agent.
Just shoot
That's
him in
a
the
mistake
head.
that he wouldn't make.
Just
You'd
shoot him in the head.
You'd shoot him to make sure. You wouldn't just leave him.
I know, but that's the thing that's why Spectre falls down where Skyfall doesn't.
Yeah. But having said that, it's still a very enjoyable film.
Oh, I love watching it. Like I know it's crap. As in, like, no, it's not crap. I know it's crappier than Skyfall, and I know it's not nearly as good as Casino Royale. But I love it,
especially
aesthetically a lot more.
For the length of Christopher Waltz's trousers as well. In some of those scenes, they're almost shagging his calf.
Yeah, and also like his little Nehru jacket and like the little loafers and. I love how they brought back Blofeld's cat just for bands.
Oh yeah. He dresses like a dad just to prove a point.
Yeah, he's great. He's great, and like the meteorite room was cool, and like I love how Bond calls him out for like, I think we're supposed to be impressed.
Yeah, it's the way he's just like, yeah, huge unstoppable force. Except it did stop.
Right here.
Right here.
No, I love that bit, like when he comes in and they're just staring at the meteorite and like he just looks over at Madeline and goes, I think we're supposed to be impressed.
I thought it'd be bigger.
I thought it'd be bigger. You quite like Madeline Swan though, don't you?
Yeah, I quite like it.
I think she's boring as hell.
No,
Everyone celebrated her as being like, oh, the Bond girl who turns down Bond, but then she immediately jumps back into bed with him. So that just
she turns him down for about 5 minutes until he saves her ass, and then she shags him.
Yeah. Also, Bond takes down a helicopter with a fucking Walter PPK. I don't care how good a shot he is, that's not happening.
Speaking as an engineer, what the fuck?
Yeah, literally, just no.
Especially seeing as you can argue that's a military grade helicopter, so it's going to be armor plated.
Yeah.
It's going to have a lot of defense mechanisms on it.
I don't know, it's a bunch of nonsense.
But let's skip over that. That's being a bit
talking purely about Madeline Swan, I found her very boring hark back to Vesper. And also what made it even more hilarious for me was like when they're going through Mr. White's sort of safe room in Morocco, and Bond finds the tape of the interrogation of Vesper and doesn't say anything about it. And she's like, what's that? And he's like, oh, nothing. Which, by the way, Quantum of Solace was a way better way of calling back to Vesper than actually being like, oh, Vesper, why? Which is like almost Lego Batman-esque, and it's like, my parents, Martha,
There's probably an outtake where he just has a breakdown in that scene.
I wouldn't have been surprised in Quantum of Solace if like someone had been like, don't do it, Vesper, and he's like, why did you say that name?
But I quite liked it, especially when he digs through the wall. He's just like, oh, this is your inheritance, and then drinks it all in front of her.
Yeah. I found her boring. I'm sorry, like she's a pretty lady and she's great. Lea Seydoux is a great actress and she did very well in Blue as the Warmest Colour, which for those who haven't seen it is an amazingly well built LGBT film with a dick director. You should go look into the backstory for that. But like she's great. She doesn't work as a Bond girl. They never really sort out what she's supposed to be. Like, is she more assertive than Bond? But then she isn't. Like, why does she fall in love with Bond again? Like, she's like, oh, I'm not going to sleep with you. Then they kick Hinks out of a train. Like, well, what do we do now? And but the thing is, the way that's
that cheesy line as well.
Yeah, the thing is, the way that's said is more like the script writers were all at the table and just were like, what do we do now? And someone just went,
yeah, that was one of the
sex?
ones that was supposed to have an asterisk by it, so they were asking each other, not putting it in the script.
That's the script writers' comment, making it into the script.
Oopsie.
Like they're penciled in comment to the director that's becoming a line. But yeah, so that's obviously now where we've ended up now with Spectre. Bond is now... Daniel Craig, obviously there was the big debate over whether... Actually, before we get onto the next movie and onto whether or not he should be replaced, and if so, who by, I want to spare a moment because we are in theory a games review channel.
Oh, we haven't talked about games for about.
I want to talk about the
2
James
weeks.
Bond games, which is I'll start off with the one that I remember first, which is the Nintendo 64 version of GoldenEye, which I bloody adore. It is a great game. The multiplayer aspect was hilarious for 2 reasons. One, like Oddjob. Oddjob was just a cheat character, and it was like this amazing because the game developers seem to have mixed up Oddjob with Knick Knack from the Man with the Golden Gun, because he's about 3 foot tall in that game.
That's
Despite
how
the
it
fact-
feels as a 6'2" guy trying to fight a midget.
Yeah, but despite the fact that in the movie he's played by an ex-American wrestler who's like 6'1", and like the only reason he looks shorter is because Connery himself is like 6'3", and like but he's actually quite a big man. And they make him tiny, and like the hilarious thing is because of the way those early games are constructed. If you convinced your friend to play as Jaws has this massive reach. If you're playing unarmed, he has this massive reach trying to smack people. So if you're the knick-knack sized Oddjob and you're standing right by him, he can't hit you. He overshoots you, so you can just whack him to death.
You just punch him in the bollocks until he dies.
Yeah. Also, Oddjob is spawns with the one-shot kill weapon that is his hat.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious. I still think it wins the award for the most infuriating way to die in any video game ever is when you're
Killed by someone's fucking
Yeah,
top hat.
you go around a corner and just see like a bowler hat flying towards you at speed, and you're like, oh, for fuck's sake. At least with the Golden Gun, like there was the thing about like it is the Golden Gun, but like it's just a hat.
Here lies Jim, died by hat.
It is a good game. It also has the game award for most irritating companion, NPC character companion ever, when you're trying to escort Natalia during the escape from the prison mission, and she just wanders into your gunfire at random. It seems so infuriating.
Yeah, it's like any Fallout companion anyway.
But like she dies immediately and then you fail the mission. It's really irritating. Just get out the fucking way! Oh my
You
god!
get those radio messages from M as well, just, you shouldn't kill civilians. Fucking no shit, I'm an agent, I've learned this.
I have a license to kill, bitch. You move out of my way. But yeah,
I'm entitled.
But like, yeah, that game was brilliant. And then of course the next one I remember was on the PlayStation 2, which was the Agent Under Fire, where they had the amazing sort of Frankenstein's because they didn't have the right to use Pierce Brosnan's face then, so they had the weird Frankenstein mashup that looked like Pierce Brosnan and Timothy Dalton had swapped genders somehow and fucked like rabbits and produced a whole host of hideous offspring.
So they both swap genders but still fuck like rabbits.
Whatever.
You misogynist.
Hey, that's Bond, not me. But it was, yeah. And also they get there's the amazing moment where like Bond shows off his incredible cat-like reflexes, where they drive past in a jeep with the rocket launcher, and you're like, okay, Bond, leap out the way.
Maybe you should move now.
Yeah, and he just stands staring at this guy with a rocket launcher for about 5 minutes, and then goes off and kills who you think is a Zoe
You'd half
Nightshade.
expect him to have a delayed reaction to the explosion as well, stand there for a bit and then fling himself across
Kills
the room.
what you think is the Bond girl, but it's actually a clone of the Bond girl because James Bond plots of the 90s. And even M is like on the phone, like, yeah, Bond, she's gone. And like even M knows that she's dead, and she's fucking miles away in London. It's grim. And then they had the sequel, which was Nightfire, which actually they finally got Pierce Brosnan's face right, but not his voice. And
Look, it's one or the other. God, take your pick.
And actually, like, it's a good game. Like, again, the plot makes fuck all sense. And they bring back the Underwater Lotus from the Roger Moore films, which actually I quite like as a car. But
Fuck off.
You go to hell. I like that car.
Yeah, it looks like a budget Countach.
It's not quite as good as the Lotus from You Only Live Twice, but like it's nice. Not the was it the one he drives in You Only Live Twice, the Japanese car? Not Lotus, the Toyota, Honda. I can't remember what it is.
The Kia Ceed.
It's something like a sports car, like a little white sports car that actually was hilariously too big for Sean Connery to fit in, so they had to make it a soft top.
Fiat 500.
And even that, no, but like it's but like it was built for a Japanese customer, so like Sean Connery is just far too tall to fit in the hardtop version, and then so they took off the top and made it a special soft top version. But even then, his head is above the windshield by like a solid actual head height. It just clearly doesn't fit in the car. It's brilliant. Anyway, so yeah, Nightfire brought back these cars, and like it brought back Zoe Nightshade from Agent Under Fire and another girl called Dominique, and like it was a great game, and the multiplayer is good as well. And they also brought back Oddjob's hat, which is like, oh my god! No! Just stop it! But there is also the world's most hilarious moment in any Bond film ever, where Bond and
frolicking in the snow.
Yeah, Bond and Zoe Nightshade are escaping from an Austrian castle party and being chased, and they fall off like a ski lift onto the snow, where Bond looks over, rolls 3 meters to his left, clambers on top of her, and is like, "Oh, how do I always end up on top? Lower center of gravity?" And you're just like, "Oh, fuck you, dude." Just there is that thing as well. Like, how long would Bond survive in a real life modern workday environment without getting some kind of sexual harassment lawsuit? I feel like
25 minutes.
I feel like the HR department of MI6 are just having to continuously tail him around the building whenever he's like in to get a mission briefing, being like, "Please stop molesting Moneypenny."
He says with his hand on someone's tit.
Yeah, like, he just got his hand on like Q's arse, and then like
That's not even a woman.
like in those scenes when he went in and like played with the gadgets he wasn't supposed to. He just goes in and does the realistic version, where he just starts fondling the female like tech assistants as they wander past during the briefings.
You've not seen the video online? It's where Q's been shut up inside too long, and he's just like, "Oh, and this is your new watch, and if activated correctly, it produces a dildo. Q, I think you've been here too long."
Yeah, and then we got with Daniel Craig being introduced to Bond, we then got a series of, was it PS3? I think it was PS3 by then.
It must have been PS3 now.
The first Daniel Craig one was this was for the Nintendo Wii. I tell a lie. Which was the remake of the original GoldenEye game for N64, but they replaced the sort of blocky 8-bit Bond with Daniel Craig and Daniel Craig's actual voice acting. And it is hilariously badly voice acted. Like, Daniel Craig sounds bored the whole way through. It's like even worse than the Peter Dinklage one in Destiny, if that's possible. He also has like another great Bond moment of like driving a truck straight at a Russian blockade without speaking Russian, without any false papers, and then unsurprisingly gets busted in 2 minutes flat, which was just terrible. And then, and also like he just continuously cocks up his own catchphrase. Like, so he's like, "The name's Bond," and you're like,
"Come on,
yes, I'm here to save you." "Oh my god!"
Oh.
And it's like, "I'm Bond." Yeah, you're nearly there. From MI6. Oh, God! You son of a... Anyway.
Bond, apparently.
Then, he sort of waddles his way through the game, voice acting-wise, and then, like there's no other way to describe it. It's the voice equivalent of, like, a drunken waddle through a park.
I mean, to be fair, do you really think Daniel Craig was anything other than half-cut while he was recording these?
Yeah, probably. Like, he clearly didn't give a crap and wasn't being paid enough. And then they replaced him. They got the proper sequel, was like Bloodstone. Which was, again, Daniel Craig's likeness, but they fired him as the voice and they got someone else to do a Daniel Craig impression. And it's
someone who gave a shit.
You know what? It's honestly better. It's just honestly better.
He does Daniel Craig better than Daniel Craig.
But Sharon Stone is the Bond girl, and she takes the mantle on from Daniel Craig of having the incredibly disinterested voice, where like she says things, she'll just turn around and go like, "But Bond, what do we do now?"
Was she at least wearing underwear in this one?
I don't even know. It's nonsensical. The plot makes no sense. The thing with Bond games is like they're very difficult to get right.
I think the one Bond game that they did get right was Everything or Nothing.
I never played Everything or Nothing.
I loved that game. It was fantastic. It had Willem Dafoe in it.
Also, you say everything. GoldenEye, man. GoldenEye was great.
Go fuck yourself.
Nintendo 64 GoldenEye was brilliant, and you can suck a dick. And so was Nightfire. You can suck a dick.
Let's wait until the video ends for that. Otherwise, we'll have to put a rating 18.
Our editor's undoing his belt as we speak.
He wasn't even wearing a belt when we started.
Yeah, why is he naked? It's random.
That's what most editors do.
I feel like revenge is going to take on us.
To be fair, I'm sat here wearing nothing but
You do
Crocs.
realise, also, like, he's sitting here listening to us patiently, not chiming in. He's going to take revenge in the editing suite, so...
my fun, but not today.
He's had to sit here for plus of an hour and a half now.
Yeah, just listen to us ramble and fighting our way through the town.
And then he's going to have to spend 6 times listening to this over and over again to get the editing right.
It's like, have you ever seen...
Not all heroes wear capes.
You know the Zelda from the Nintendo 64 with the Navi, the fairy, going like, "Hey, listen!"
Oh, God.
And like someone did a meme of like Link locked up in a psych ward with just "Hey, listen" written in blood on the walls everywhere. I feel like that's what like is going to end up with our editor, just like all our voices, just like quotes from our voices.
They find
written
him
in blood on the wall.
They find him in a cell somewhere and just, "Hello and welcome to Xbox."
Yeah, like, "Welcome to Zero Fox Given. Welcome to Zero Fox Given. Welcome to Zero Fox Given." Just going slightly insane.
Blood and semen on the floor.
Yeah, I mean the thing is with making a Bond game, you either put it on rails and it's all the linear as hell, and it's a fairly boring experience that it's not terribly good in terms of replay value, but then you save it in the multiplayer, or it just becomes this incredibly grim sort of just slog. Like the great bit in Bloodstone again, like where Daniel Craig's face, not his voice, like smashes
Just his face.
smashes his way through the entirety of Bangkok by driving a dump truck. To the point where
Maybe they took a little bit of lessons from Saints Row on that one.
to the point where even the Bond villain at the end calls him out for being the world's least subtle spy.
Dude, you have one job.
No, literally. Yeah, so there's that. I don't know how you'd make a new Bond game, to be honest. I just don't think you can.
You'd have to do it with the new Bond. You'd have to wait until they have a new Bond.
Goes away because he's
Just
too.
just because he doesn't give enough
Which
shit
does bring us
for
onto
it.
the topic of the next Bond, because I know
Exactly.
Daniel Craig is now coming back for another film, and I'm more power to him. But he's getting old now for Bond. He's in his
He also hates Bond.
he's in his early 50s. Like the pay deal needed to keep him on board is massive. Like, and clearly they kept him on because they didn't know who to cast. I think was the issue. And it's the same thing they had with Roger Moore and with Sean Connery. They were panicking. They don't know who to replace him with because he's become the definitive Bond of the new generation.
Yeah.
So, leaving aside the question of whether he should have come back, because I think he's earned the right to try and finish on a high note, to be honest. I think whatever you think about him, he's earned that right.
Oh, yeah.
Whether he will is another matter. I personally don't think the next one will be good, but that's just my personal opinion.
I'm reserving judgment. I don't want to go into it thinking that it won't be good. I want to
I'd rather go
stay
and think
on
it's
the
going to be
fence.
crap and get a pleasant surprise than go and think it could be amazing and it's going to be terrible, because that was sort of what happened with Spectre.
I'd rather just stay on the fence and hope that it's
Fair
going to be
enough.
decent.
So I suppose, the big question is, who would you... I'm going to do this in two ways. If you're going to cast a new Bond for the modern Bond, and if you're going to cast a Bond for... If they decide to bring it back to the period Bond of Bond's roots, and set it back in the 50s, 60s of the books, who would you cast for each one? So let's start with the modern one. Let's start with that.
Well, for a new Bond, there's quite a few names being chucked around, none of which I'm 100% happy with. Obviously, there's quite a lot of stigma around Idris Elba
yeah.
being quite high up the list for that.
Idris obviously would be the first Black Bond.
Well, to be honest, I don't think that's a major
No,
point,
that's,
really.
that's nothing to do with the character, and I find it annoying.
Well, that's
when
the thing. A
people-
lot of media is making the attention just like, oh, he'd be a Black Bond, but no one really cares.
This is the thing, right? Like when you're casting Bond, his skin color is nothing to do with the character. Like when you're recasting a character, if the character, if their central core character components are left intact, it doesn't matter who's playing them.
No.
So long as those aren't violated. Like you couldn't have a male Miss Marple because by definition, Miss Marple, the part of her characterization is that she's an old lady. Like that's integral to the character.
Yeah.
If you change that, it'd be an interesting character, but it wouldn't be Miss Marple. And
Matt
ditto-
Smith, Miss Marple.
Yeah, and with Bond, a Black Bond, nothing about Bond, even in the books of his original period, that says he has to be a white dude. Because
Yeah.
that attitude of the dickishness, the misogyny, the broken psyche, the psychopathy, can all be done by a black actor.
Yeah,
And,
none of it covers race. You know, he's misogynistic and he's homophobic potentially.
yeah, and
But he's not racist, so it doesn't cover him.
My thing with Idris Elba, and the only reason I wouldn't cast him, 10 years ago, he would be my first choice. But that's my point. He's the same age roughly as Daniel Craig.
So there'd be no point in doing
You get
it.
him for one movie max. I know he looks younger than Craig, but you get him for 1 or 2 movies max, and I just don't think that's worth it.
Well, I know a lot of people also want Tom Hiddleston as well, and based on his performance in The Night Manager, I'd have to say no.
I just think he's too whiny to be Bond. I like Hiddleston for his roles that he does well, like Loki. He's great as Loki, but
Well, I just in The Night Manager, he was supposed to play an ex-army type, you know, sneaking around.
it's his audition for Bond. Yeah, it is his audition for Bond.
Yeah, but he fucked it up.
He even ordered the
didn't-
goddamn martini at the end.
Well, yeah, I didn't think the acting from his side of things was fantastic in The Night
Yeah,
Manager.
weirdly,
he
the guy from
he
that
wasn't
show
as
we really
composed.
want in the Bond series, we'll get
It's
onto
Hugh
next.
Laurie.
It's Hugh Laurie is the Bond villain, which we'll get onto in a second. But
Yeah. Hey, fuck you, that's my choice. You have to think of your own. You're not stealing
No,
this.
no. I forgot the Bond villain name. You can go to hell.
I need this.
No.
No.
Sit.
No.
Bad dog.
I'm already sitting.
Okay, fine. We'll lie down on the floor, you slut.
No, the mic wouldn't pick me up then.
That's true. No one would pick you up then. You're just unwantable.
Everyone would pick me up.
Yeah, so Hiddleston is just not Bond. And that's no disrespect to Hiddleston. I just think he's too soppy to be.
He's not as composed. He's not as in control of his emotions. He's not as detached from the situation.
He doesn't look the part. He doesn't sound the part.
He isn't as big as the part.
Yeah, he's. Again, I think he'd be. If they recast Alex Trevelyan as 006, I think Hiddleston would be a great choice for that.
Yeah. He's the side act. He's not the main act.
Well, he'd be a very good actor in his own right as a villain, for example, in that kind of the traitorous Bond kind of way. Mm. Also, be a slightly sort of meta joke about the fact he wasn't really good enough for the actual Bond, but that would be good. Also, that you get that element of rivalry which you want between 006 and 007, but he's just not Bond.
Well, I know we've both also got ideas of younger people who, not right now, are ready to be Bond, but in a few
my
years'
contentious
time
one
they
is
should
Robert
be.
Pattinson.
Well, mine's Taron Egerton. I'd like to see.
I disagree with you, and I know you disagree with mine. But
Yeah.
I think wait 10 years and Robert Pattinson. I mean, because what is Robert Pattinson at the end of the day? He's a posh, educated, good-looking, very masculine-looking, sarcastic asshole who no one really likes.
Well, that's the thing.
Which is Bond.
The only thing I agree with Robert Pattinson on is because he just couldn't give a fuck about most things. He's so detached already.
He's actually a hilarious individual if you ever listen to his commentaries.
Well, exactly,
He's
because
brilliant.
he hates Twilight. So when you watch him reviewing Twilight or
It's
commenting
brilliant.
on...
Oh, it was just, again, anyone listening, just listen to his commentary on the first Twilight movie. It's hilarious. But yeah, so Taron Egerton, you'd never separate him from Kingsman. That's my issue. He'd
I think
always
you
be
can.
Kingsman first.
No, I think you can do that. He's done some other stuff already that's
But the thing with
quite
the-
noticeable.
yeah,
He's
but
been in Legend, he's been in
Yeah, but the difference is that
Eagle.
Kingsman is a deliberate send-up of Bond.
Yeah, but I still think, especially because obviously they're gonna stop doing Kingsman. There might be a third, there might
I think
not
there'll be a third, but after that they'll stop it.
And give him some time, maybe 10, maybe 15 years when he's got older, because he's still quite a young guy now.
Doesn't solve the problem of who to cast next, though.
Yeah, that's true.
Actually, I'm going to push you for a decision. Who, just on the top of your head, who do you cast as a modern Bond in the next time around?
As a modern Bond, because I'm out of... Idris Elba is the safe one. And he'd be good as a Bond to kind of stand in while you're waiting for someone else to
So
grow.
you think just give it to Idris for 2 movies and then recast
For
it?
2 movies now, because there's no one who thinks... As well as that, you should think for Bond, someone who screams at you, they're either right for the role or they're not. So,
Okay.
off the top of my head, I'd say Idris for a couple of films until you find someone who really
And then
fits it.
for a more period Bond, you don't want to go with Michael Fassbender or something. I thought Fassbender would be
Fassbender would be good because he can pull off that older, maybe 40s, 50s look even. He
Yeah.
can go back further than Sean Connery's Bond.
I think he'd be too close to Craig for a modern Bond.
Yeah. No, I agree with you with that. He definitely seems like he could do a period Bond fantastic.
I think he'd do a great 60s, 70s Bond. He's not my pick for a 60s, 70s Bond, but I think he would be good. I would have no qualms about seeing him cast as Bond.
I mean, if we were going back to period times, we'd be going back to times when Hugh Laurie was younger, and I think he'd be a great Bond when he was younger.
No, he looked too soft when he was younger. My pick, actually, for a period Bond, based on his turn in And Then There Were None, is Aidan Turner, the current Poldark. I think he absolutely, when they did that 1920s period setting with him in And Then There Were None, he just looks the part. He sounds the part. I know he's not British, but he's very, very, very good, and I'd like to see him as Bond.
If you wanted a Bond who couldn't give a shit, go with Philip Glenister.
Well, one who doesn't
brilliant.
give a shit, just go with I don't know, Ian McKellen, Patrick Stewart as Bond,
Patrick Stewart would be fantastic.
Bond in his Alzheimer years. Just make it like the Logan.
Sat in a nursing home. Did I ever tell you about the time?
The Logan was the way that Logan was to the X-Men movies. Just have Patrick Stewart be that, and for the Bond movies, just call it Bond, and just and have it be like an Alzheimer Bond running on a rampage through London, thinking there's a villain when there actually isn't one. But
Liam Neeson.
I'll tell you who my pick for my absolute pick for a new Bond is, and it's gonna sound weird to people who haven't seen the film I'm about to talk about, which is The Guest. Dan Stevens, who most people remember as the slightly chubby-faced, nice guy from Downton Abbey, but he did a film called The Guest, which was basically his audition for Bond, which is all about him being a charming, psychopathic, murderous sort of ex-soldier in a rural American town. And he does it with an American accent, which obviously detracts, but he is British, so there's that. And he lost... Not only did he lose a lot of weight, but he put on a tremendous amount of muscle for that role, and he just looks, sounds, and acts the absolute part of a charming psychopath. If you want to take Bond in that direction, which I think is the direction he needs to go in going forward, he's just absolutely your man, and he's young enough that he could do another 4, maybe 5 films before he even got to Daniel Craig's age. And that gives you plenty of time to recast it, and I think he'd be brilliant. He's definitely my pick.
So I think, guessing from the fact that neither of us has mentioned a woman in either of these, we're both of the same opinion as well, with the age-old question of should there be a female James Bond. I think we both have the same answer.
My answer for this is, and the reason, because I think it needs to be justified, the answer was why. Because I know Cara Delevingne was talking about how she doesn't want to be a Bond girl, she wants to be Bond. And this is the thing, it goes back to that question, does recasting that character with a female actor change the character to such an extent that it's no longer Bond? Or does
Yes.
or is it manageable? Like, and it depends what you mean by Bond. If you mean by Bond the character from the books, the misogynist, the man's man who's from Eton, who went to Oxford, who all this crap. Yes, it absolutely has to be a man. You couldn't have a Jane Bond. It would be you could have a female character who had all those characteristics, and it would be a very interesting character. But fundamentally, being male is integral to being Bond. Like, and that's just something that runs through. Maybe because Ian Fleming is just that kind of guy, but that's something that runs categorically.
Well, it's to go
through
with the time as well in the 60s.
Yes, that's what categorically runs through Bond. You can't separate the two.
Yeah.
If you had a Jane Bond, like I said, it would be a fascinating character, and I'd love to see a movie that had a character like that. I mean, Charlize Theron essentially did that for Atomic Blonde, and that's great. I mean, it's a weird film, but she's great.
Yeah, she's fantastic at playing a badass woman.
Yeah, and like if they were going to do a female Bond, I hope they don't. But if they do, she'd be my pick rather than Cara Delevingne. But I think for the reasons stated above, I would never have a female Bond. There are plenty of characters who could be female. Sherlock Holmes is one. I'd love to see a female Sherlock Holmes.
That would be great, actually.
I'd like to see, without getting a female Doctor Who, which is long overdue.
Yeah.
I'd like to see a black or a Pakistani or an Asian Bond, because that's perfectly like within the character's remit. There's nothing about that says that couldn't be that.
Yeah.
And that would be fascinating. But I think just because of this particular character, you couldn't have a female one.
Well, no, because it's someone who they believe they're superior to women. They, he
Not
views
even that. It's just someone who is.
he views women as his playthings. He's
Being male is
misogynistic.
integral to his own psyche.
He eats, drinks, kills, sleeps, and fucks.
Yeah. Essentially, like, if you wanted a female character who has all the narcissism and stuff of Bond and all the women hating of Bond, but who is a woman, it's been done. It's the character that Ruby Rose plays in Orange is the New Black. It's essentially that. And it's great. It's a wonderful character, but it's not Bond.
Yeah.
It's fundamentally not Bond. It's a bit like saying, can we cast Sherlock Holmes and make him an idiot? Well, no, because it wouldn't be Sherlock Holmes. It's just very simple. So we'll move on from there and talk about the Bond girls. And like, obviously, we've moved away, I think, thank God, from the... It was funny for its time. It's now... Well, it wasn't funny for its time, but it was a product of its time. The ridiculous Bond girl with the ridiculous Bond girl names.
Yeah.
How do we do a good Bond girl moving forward? Because even Madeline Swan, who was supposed to be like the kick up the arse of like, oh, she can take care of herself, who really didn't.
Well, that's... I don't know, when you see that, though, that's kind of making too much of a point. Like, especially with, obviously, because we're in the modern age as well, we're in so many debates about, women doing the exact same things as men and things like that. You couldn't... If you watch a film now and you see a woman doing, she's holding James Bond to herself, she's as good as him, she can do everything that he can do. You feel like that's making a point. It's deliberately trying to go out of its way just to make a point and a nod to current affairs outside of film.
I think the way they need to do it is revisit the idea that like Electra King was in
So
Not Enough.
Yeah, someone who's their own entity instead.
Yeah, like someone who might play at being the Bond girl, but who's actually got their own agenda.
Yeah, exactly. Well, story. Every single Bond film, every Bond girl, barring that one, they've strung along with Bond. Even Madeline Swan, who's supposed to be doing
they're not plot integral.
her own
They're
thing.
just not plot integral.
Apart from, well, you could say Vesper, because she had her own agenda.
Again, yeah, but Vesper's... Is she really a Bond girl, though? I mean, until the end of the movie, where she radically changes personality.
I mean, what do you view as a Bond girl? Because to me, a Bond girl is basically anyone who James Bond puts his dick in.
I mean, is it time for a Bond boy, then, perhaps? Just like,
Well, Silver was going to be the first one.
Again, like, actually, I'm going to avoid that debate because I think categorically, like, it wouldn't really matter if it was a Bond boy. I don't think that's a huge debate that needs to be had. I mean, obviously, some people will kick up a huge shitstorm over it, but it's not something that really.
Well, I think it's a debate that can either, you either don't have it or you have it for hours and hours. It's not something that you skim over it in 5 minutes.
Yeah,
You're going to have
I don't think we can discuss it in the time we got that. I think to stick with the Bond girl thing, I think the only way they can do it going forward is to make the Bond girl either an anti-hero or the villain. Like, maybe not the main villain, but a villainous entity. Because they need to have their own reason. And not just a villain who's a henchman to the larger villain, but like a villain who's got their own plot and ideas.
Well, yeah, in a Bond film, Bond is going to beat the villain. So why not have the woman, the Bond girl who's got her own agenda is doing something, she beats Bond.
Yeah, maybe not
way.
in the main plot, maybe he overcomes the real villain, but like she beats him in
She's
some
still
way.
beating him in some way. And that's something that you could really see, because it gets a little bit old. You see, the good guy always wins, he always beats the villain, he always outsmarts them, overpowers them, whatever. If you see a woman, she outsmarts him, she plays him at his own game, that's something that's really interesting that you could see.
Right, so just to wrap up this one, just again, off the top of your head, who's your pick for a next Bond girl?
I mean, now that we've mentioned her, Charlize Theron seemed pretty good.
She would be great. I think she'd be a better villain.
If she was
top billing as a villain if she's in a Bond movie.
I don't know. Unless it was a double-parter, as in you start out with one film with one villain, and it turns out she was the villain all along, or something like that.
I'm going to cast it in my headcanon of the Bond played by Dan Stevens, so Cara Delevingne. I know she says she'd rather be Bond than a Bond girl, but I think she'd be a very good foil as a Bond girl, precisely because she wants to be Bond.
Well, yeah.
She wouldn't sit down and take shit, which is good. Which brings us on to the very last topic of conversation, which we've only got about 10 minutes left to do, so we've got to rattle through it. Which is the Bond villain. And I'm going to get in here first because I know you want to say this.
Go fuck yourself. No.
We both want Hugh Laurie.
No.
We both want... Okay, well, we'll present this jointly. We both want Hugh Laurie as a Bond villain. I'd love to see him being like this kind of... Almost like he's in The Night Manager. Like, the public think he's this wonderful figure, and he's secretly a sleazebag, and everyone in the know knows that he's a sleazebag, but he's so powerful he gets away with it.
Well, everyone knows that he's a sleazebag, but you can't prove it, so you just have to accept it.
Yeah, like his character in Night Manager was basically a Bond villain.
Yeah.
And I love that. Like, just take that idea of him being, like, on the surface a humanitarian or on the surface an environmentalist. Like, actually... Anthony Horowitz's Alex Rider series had one very good villain. Actually, it has had quite a few good villains. No, I know it is sort of an XP of James Bond. But like, it had one guy who basically sets up an artificial famine by like genetically modifying crops to produce deadly toxin in Africa, with the idea that then he will then do a huge charity drive in like countries like the UK that are very charitably giving, and just keep all the money and fuck off. I think that's a very modern Bond villain plot, or like the seizing all the water from Quantum of Solace, or another one which I think Hugh Laurie would do really well in is like there's some kind of like he runs like an environmental cleanup agency that deliberately causes a gigantic oil spill so that he can.
So they have to make millions cleaning it up.
No, so yeah, A, and then B, so they can profit off the stock price plummeting, something like that, like just something really hideous like that, like flooding the entire
just market
Indian
manipulation
Ocean with just full of oil or something like that. Maybe even cause like a regional war in the process. Like, something like that he can just profit massively off of.
It'd be good to see Bond actually involved in a war as well. You'd see Bond, a more soldiery aspect
running through Kashmir
well.
Province or something,
Yeah, it'd be great. Dropping the spy, the espionage side of it just for a bit, just to see him as an actual foot soldier, see him cope.
No, I think that would be a bit of a waste. Like for the opening prologue, maybe, but for like the whole film, it would be a drag. I think.
Oh no, not for the whole film. Just on about a small sequence where you actually see him doing something.
I also like my headcanon name for the Hugh Laurie villain is Julian Caspar, which I think is just great. I think that's just a great Bond villain name, Julian Caspar. Like just. Make him a villain. It needs to happen. And like, aside from him, if I was going to pick another one, I've already mentioned Tom Hiddleston as a remake of Alec Trevelyan, but like I think Cillian Murphy is potentially a good shout, and the Christopher Walken kind of mould of villain would be a good shout. I think maybe getting someone older, like I can imagine Ian McKellen being a Bond villain. I know we've mentioned him before multiple times in this podcast, but I can imagine him being a Bond villain.
Yeah, you almost. Obviously, if he hadn't have died, and if he hadn't have already been used, Christopher Lee, if he'd have come back when he was older.
Charlize Theron, if she wants to be a villain, would be a good one to do.
Well, I still think that's, my perfect idea for her being a Bond girl is her being a Bond girl in one film, turning on him, beating him in one aspect of the first Bond film, then almost being a two-parter, and her being the main Bond villain in the second one.
Yeah.
Coming after that would be quite an interesting thing to see, because you haven't really seen a proper two-parter. Obviously, films linked to each other. But you haven't seen one which leaves on a specific note and picks up that exact note again straight away.
No, I agree. Which brings us, sadly, but finally and climactically, to the end of our Bond podcast.
We've already overrun by about 30 minutes anyway.
I'm going to say this one more time because it gives me pleasure. Nobody's done it better. The other fellas just aren't good enough.
Do I look like I give a damn?
Do we look like we give a damn? We're going to go off and make our wonderful Vespa Martinis, which are obviously, I will let you take this one.
They are 3 measures of Gordon's gin, one of Absolute Vodka, and a splash of Quina Lillet, which you can't actually obtain anymore. You have to use Lillet Blanc.
Yeah. And your thin, slice of lemon. Sorry, your thin, long slice of lemon peel.
Or if you want to be classy, discard the fruit and go with some olives.
Nah, lemon peel.
No, olives.
You're wrong. I love olives, but you're wrong. Next podcast. I always make that mistake. To me, we always record.
Do you want these to be a weekly thing or something? No. Do you want our editor to kill himself?
We always record them like every week because that's how we have to do it. We always record them the week in advance. Next podcast.
That's still every fortnight.
We will be talking about. You totally throw me off. I killed it now. We're going to be talking about serial killers in film and in video games. We're going to be talking about the Hannibal Lecters. We're going to be talking about the Sevens. and the solaces of this world, and that will be a dark trip down the Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole. There is actually an Alice in Wonderland, and I think a Peter Pan themed serial killer thing that never quite made it, which I really want to talk about as well.
Maybe dab on the Yorkshire Ripper.
In the meantime, I think Q is signalling us to go down and get our briefing from him, so we will leave you viewers whilst Jordi clots his way, Austin Power style, through the kitchen, and I suavely make my way to the door to throw him out from the premises.
Sounds lovely.
That's here at Zero Fox Gibbon. You are awesome, we love you, carry on listening, and we wait to hear with bated breath what your comments on Bond are.
If only my parents could love me that much.
They'll never will.